Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching second and final part of What If Naruto Was Not a Jinchūriki. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
No other location came so close to touching the clouds in the sky as the summit of Mount Myoboku, which served as the boundary between heaven and earth. Every inch of this sacred world was covered in otherworldly vegetation, and the mountain itself was a huge expanse of rock and forest. On the very top of the natural formation was a golden palace surrounded by terraces hewn into the stone mountainside. The structure, which was not humanly constructed, shone with greater magnificence than all of the greatest and most exquisite human palaces. Sunlight reflected off the sloping surfaces, giving the impression that the palace was a massive fire that was spreading its light throughout the surrounding areas. The entire island of Japan, the boundary between land and sea, and the turbulent sea separating the land from other continents, could be seen from the summit of Mount Myoboku. However, no one was able to see the legendary mountain because it was shielded by powers that were beyond human comprehension. A solitary figure sat and looked out over the snowy landscape. Out there, in the lands of men, the seasons changed as swiftly as their hearts, but here, summer was always bright. With its purple cloak adorning its bestial form, the enormous toad squatted on strong hind legs. His face was scarred, indicating that he had fought in numerous battles. There was only one silver sheath by his side, simple and unassuming, but it contained a weapon that had taken many lives, both human and otherwise. With his hands always poised on his scabbard, the toad sighed as he watched the dark clouds gather. Suddenly, an amphibian that was smaller and lighter landed directly behind him. With a somewhat feminine tone, she declared, "Great Lord Gamabunta, your warriors are ready." She spoke in their people's ancient language, which no other being could understand, and they weren't human words. The great toad nodded and bounded off the platform. "Once more, my people are called to battle. I didn't anticipate how far reaching Father Fox's passing would be. If necessary, we will scour the planet and battle the flaming legions until we are extinct." A tiny red fox was concealed beneath a massive green leaf, its slitted eyes watching the toads. Jiraiya observed the abrupt change with astonishment. Evidently, an angry beast had materialized out of thin air and began murdering the ninja who were invading. Upon closer examination, the Hokage could see the human figure dangling from the chains. There was no question that it was human. However, what sort of person could cause such devastation? Jiraiya gave the order for his soldiers to wait and watch. Its features were covered in a thick layer of blood, giving it a truly demonic face as it eviscerated and decapitated, killing trained killers as easily as crushing bugs. He then gathered his ninjas. "Look, it is causing the enemy to flee. Cut off their escape routes and kill as many as you can before they can reach their camp. Avoid the unidentified target for the moment. We will deal with it after we rout the enemy." The ninja force silently nodded and charged onto the field, using their chakra enhanced strength to propel themselves forward. Fear would be the ninjas' downfall because it caused them to become blinded. The enemy was running aimlessly, but every respectable leaf ninja knew the forest like the back of his hand, so some of the leaf shinobi dashed into it with the goal of encircling and destroying the invaders. Jiraiya himself went up to the demon and helped it completely destroy the enemy until there were no more ninjas to be seen. The sudden tension caused the chains to whip around, slicing bodies in half with a final crash. Snow melted and turned into crimson sludge as warm red fluid mixed with it. That absurd orgy of violence was over. Konoha would live to see another day. The big man turned then, and let out a gasp. Naruto's face was visible beneath the crusted blood. With hesitation, Jiraiya murmured, "Naruto." There was no sign of recognition on his face. He was unheeding. Sharp, tipped chains were raised and aimed at the Hokage as he charged with a roar of rage. Jiraiya was surprised by Naruto's response. However, he was unaware of the reason behind the blonde's transformation. "The Kyuubi? Is this its impact? Naruto, listen to me, snap out of it." Jiraiya tried to reach out again, deftly avoiding the wild strikes. "No!" Naruto yelled, winding the man with a well-placed punch that caught him off guard. The Konoha Ninja Corps were gathered and watching the scene with wide eyes. Their leader was defending Konoha and their home while battling this demon from hell. It was raining once more, and the droplets of liquid mixed with the bottle's spilled fluids. The two were encircled by an icy mist that highlighted their silhouettes and created a graphic image of blood. Blood slowly seeping into the already scarred soil from the grotesquely scattered bodies and severed limbs. Everything else was choked by the stench of death, but the two continued their lethal dance without pausing. A watcher on top of Konoha's gates was disturbed by the mist that was encroaching on the island for an odd reason and eventually completely engulfed the battlefield. Shikaku Nara was regarded as a genius for a reason, and he did not dismiss such seemingly insignificant things like a lesser man would. Even though the ground was now nearly hidden, the Hokage continued to fight his enemy, albeit grudgingly. Strange cries reverberated through the air, and unknown shadows huddled in anticipation from beneath the mist. "Do not go out. The Hokage is on his own right now. We have other things to worry about. Ready the defenses." Shikaku yelled quickly to warn the others. Then the shadows exploded, flinging themselves out again. Jiraiya's eyes widened as kunai suddenly swarmed toward them. "Naruto! Stop now, they're coming again." With a silent scream of anger, Naruto raised his chains, harmlessly sidestepped the kunai, and resumed his attack. He was determined to get his revenge. "There will be more coming, more people to feed my wrath." Ninja flashed through hand seals and surrounded him and the Hokage as they emerged from the mist. A few ninja yelled, "Suiten! Suiryuden, water style! Water dragon," in unison. 5 dragons appeared in the air and charged directly at Naruto as the sound of water roared in his ears. He had no choice but to enclose himself in a cocoon of protection with his chains. In a single motion, Jiraiya ducked under the attack and threw himself into the air. He began to channel chakra into his hand by opening his palm. In his outstretched palm, blue energy swirled until the hum of energy overpowered the clamor of combat. Jiraiya landed and smashed the chakra, which had been shaped into a ball of suppressed energy, into the ground, causing an epic explosion. Rasengan. As their skin was flayed from flesh, the ninja screamed as they were torn to the bone. Jiraiya was thrown backward by the force, but he quickly got back on his feet. He had been blown toward Konoha by the blast, and the clanging of metal was audible. The white-haired man looked up at the raging battle on the battlements. The enemy charged into the village, and kunai's muffled and clanging cries echoed. "Ninja Kiri! How did they arrive so quickly? Just fight, no time to think." He saw his friends and comrades fighting to the death everywhere he looked. The snarl etched on Sume Inuzuka's face as she struck the invaders with bone-crushing blows. Choza Akamichi's enormous frame, which towered 10 meters above his enemies as he crushed them with his feet, and Hyuga Hiyoshi's cool, collected face as he dealt with his attackers with flawless efficiency. When Jiraiya witnessed all of this, he allowed his battle rage to consume him, seeping into his veins and causing the adrenaline to push his body to its breaking point. In front of him, 2 Kiri ninja were trying to simultaneously stab and gut him. Chopping at one ninja's collarbone and then twisting and elbowing the other in the groin, he pushed himself into the air and somersaulted over the approaching attackers. The Sannin immediately slammed his fists into both of the ninjas' heads at once, caving their foreheads as they fell to the ground in agony. Leaping forward, he ambushed another adversary without warning, crashing into him and crushing his internal organs. He spun about and jabbed his fingers into another enemy's eyes, pushing his limbs through the eye sockets and into the brain. The man could also make out Naruto fighting in the distance. He was a tornado of death, hammering and crushing, destroying his enemies without distinction. It was unclear how long they fought for their lives, but even the most experienced Kiri ninja had to reorganize after the attack on Konoha, an immovable object. Its supporters had refused to back down, costing them lives and blood for every inch. At last, the enemy lost momentum and fell back. Jiraiya signaled his troops to stand ready, unwilling to let his guard down a second time. Not a single leaf ninja who had previously ventured into the forest returned. Once more, the man crept in Naruto's direction. Like a leaf in the wind, he swayed around unsteadily. The Uzumaki eventually fell to the ground, exhausted, the chain's retraction returning to the body. Jiraiya gently raised the boy, taking care not to injure him. He withdrew back into the village with shadowed eyes, and no one dared to question his choice. A power of legendary proportions and blood-red chains. What might the boy be trying to tell me? I can only hope he hasn't lost his mind yet because I didn't sense any demonic presence. Aburame clan compound. A few days later, the elders of the Aburame clan were meeting for the 10th time in a week since the invasion began. Each clan head would express their views in a cool, unambiguous monotone whenever the clan meetings convened. For the Aburame, that was the closest thing to a furious dispute. But today was different. Shibi Aburame, the clan head, was the only one who spoke, summarizing the various points raised by the members. In the hopes that a decision would be made at last, the elders sat up straight. The past week has seen large amounts of Konoha casualties. Kirigakure has recently sent reinforcements to bolster the already large invading force. Currently, 3 hidden villages, Kumogakure, Sanagakure and Kirigakure, are in a military alliance against the Leaf Village. I estimate another month. 2 at the most. Before Konoha is totally crushed by the enemy. Blockades have also ensured no reinforcements from Iwagakure can reach Konoha. Already, the Aburame clan has sustained 12 casualties, all of great potential. Shibi continued. This, however, is far smaller than the casualties sustained by the Hyuga and Inuzuka clans. WTHICH make up most of the total amount of 300 dead ninja. It was finally too much for an elderly elder named Suigao Aburame. He interrupted Shibi and drew stares from the other. The Aburame clan does not contain as many members as the other clans of Konoha. We cannot afford more casualties. Our clan line is already greatly threatened as it is. The Hokage's decision to fight to the death is absolutely illogical. If we agree to make concessions, then we would certainly save a large proportion of the shinobi population. Standing behind his father, clan head Shibi Aburame, Muda was drenched in sweat from what the Aburame would describe as an angry outburst. I'm hoping they don't take any drastic action. Shibi answered, clearly pronouncing each word, so what do you propose? That we go against the orders of the Hokage? Page 1. Deeply inhaling, Suigao said, I propose we attempt to ensure the survival of our clan. Disobeying the Hokage's orders is simply a means to an end, that is, to live to see another day. If we cannot convince the Hokage to make concessions, then what say we join the enemy? Unusually, and seemingly disturbed, Shibi hesitated. Betray the Hokage. Jiraiya is a resolute man, so he will not agree to make concessions. It is logical to defect, but it will not be easy. What makes you think Kuma will accept us into their ranks? Quickly, Suigao responded, that is simple. We will have to show proof of our allegiance, so we would have to commit to an act of betrayal that firmly proves the Aburame to them. We could eliminate one other Konoha clan, then escape immediately. And what clan do you propose we eliminate? The Inuzuka. After careful deliberation, I have come to the conclusion that it is the clan most easy to eliminate. The Hyuga and Uchiha are too versed in the arts of combat to eliminate without significant casualties. The Nara, Yamanaka and Akamichi compounds are too close together for a precision strike. We have, however, gained the Inuzuka's trust, so it would be easy to defeat them when their backs are turned. Furthermore, Konoha will be severely weakened by the loss of their premier tracking clans, and would most certainly fall soon after. It is the only logical way to ensure our collective survival. Muda Aburame experienced the same emotional pains. He was never able to escape it, even after receiving years of specialized training in the Aburame method of emotional suppression. It was simply so. A human. He was unable to separate himself from it. Perhaps the ideal Aburame members were his father, the clan head, and his younger brother. They were composed, rational, and emotionally aloof. However, emotion would always overtake him and hold him captive. This was an opportunity to think, not to feel, obviously. He still experienced a weird sense of betrayal, but it was only an emotion and could not be measured, since it was the only sensible course of action to ensure their survival. His clan would betray Konoha. Despite his best efforts, he was unable to betray his friends and Hana Inuzuka, the person he loved, even if it meant his death. Father won't agree, surely. With a final tone, Shibi sighed and said, so be it. Muda was having trouble breathing. When the meeting was over, he hurried out with a strange burden on his chest. After an hour of aimless wandering, he finally arrived at the Konoha Memorial Stone. He could no longer stand it as he looked down and saw the names of the Konoha martyrs. He cried for the first time in his life. He was unable to think clearly as the tears streamed down his face. Those names. The individuals who gave their lives in defense of Konoha. Is that correct? To rely on reasoning for everything? Do we not have a place for loyalty? He had a deep love for her. She was different from the other members of her clan. She was never controlling or overbearing. Rather, she was respectful, quiet, and as quiet as an Inuzuka could be. Instead of just beating some people into submission, as most Inuzuka do, she demonstrated her strength in overcoming obstacles when they arose. Muda had known the girl for a long time. They were completely different from what their clans had anticipated. Since their genin days, he had been observing Hana, silently observing and analyzing her. He wanted to go up to her and introduce himself, but he was never brave enough. Long ago, he had acknowledged to himself that the kinship had evolved into fascination and, ultimately, love. Love. An emotion that Aburame is said to be unfamiliar with. Every emotion was. To guarantee the continuation of their clan, the Aburame merely mated. but what his clan was trying to accomplish now made Muta's heart hurt. Betray Konoha? How can they just leave their best friends behind? But logic has always been at the center of it. But they want to slaughter the Inuzuka now? Never, even if Hana has to endure pain and suffering for the rest of her life, I will protect her. Nevertheless, I have to unavoidably betray my own family in order to protect her. Should I follow my instincts or support my clan as we go to hell? Muta looked up and saw the moon. It radiated a threatening red, as though blood were seeping out of it. The fortress of the Shogun. In an attempt to meet with the Shogun, Yagayu Munyoshi hurried down the corridor. The samurai had been uneasy due to strange events in the last few days, and even though they had heard that Kumo was taking control of Konoha, they still had other problems to deal with. The nights had grown longer, the days shorter, and numerous warriors had abruptly vanished for no apparent reason. The men's confidence was undermined by the prevalence of superstitions. The moon had turned blood red, which caused the soldiers to feel wronged and fearful without reason. The guards nodded briefly as he arrived at the golden double doors, then pushed them open to let him in. Shogun Sama. Kumo has sent a messenger. They requested assistance in assaulting Konoha. Do we mobilize our troops? Munyoshi reported without delay after bowing respectfully to the Shogun. The Shogun whispered, so, they finally agreed to reveal the Leaf's location to us. We have our own problems now. We can't afford to spare any troops. We have to get to the bottom of these disappearances plaguing our ranks. How long before the exorcists reach the fortress? Munyoshi responded right away, saying, they should arrive tomorrow by the latest. Tell the messenger that we will not support Konoha, but that we cannot spare any soldiers. We will await the exorcists from Myoboku. Assemble all samurai within the fortress, and bar anybody from entering or leaving. The Shogun commanded. It will be done. Returning to Konoha one day later, Muta was on guard duty, silently considering what would be the best course of action. His teammate Hana Inuzuka was standing next to him, taking care of herself and inspecting the chakra seals on the gates. It was a very quiet night. Muta was feeling even more alone now because the cicada's familiar chirping had virtually stopped since the invasion started. The Aburame were taken aback by Hana's gentle voice as she said, Muta, I've only known you for a short time, but I'd like to say you were a good friend. We never know when we might die, so I just wanted to tell you how I felt. Additionally, I've known you for a while. I'd watch you from the shadows ever since we were kids. I am aware of your favorite dish, Sukune, and your deep affection for your younger brother, Kiba. I understand how you feel about. Hana poked the unresponsive Aburame and muttered, Muta? Can you hear me? Without even flinching, Muta said, yes, I can hear you. You have been a good friend too. I wish you'd stop talking in that monotone. It creeps me out, Hana laughed. I'll keep that in mind. That awkward silence again. Neither wanted it to continue, but neither wanted to break it. My dream is to make my parents proud, to show my clan, and the world, that women are as good as men. Hana suddenly said. Her abrupt statement, if anything, made the situation even more awkward. Is that her dream? I've read that the first step to developing enduring friendships is sharing your goals and aspirations with others. This is due to the fact that emotional bonds are formed between two. Hana growled angrily, Muta? Are you ignoring me? At the end? With a tone as dead as ever, Muta answered, no I am not. Hana sighed and decided to play with her three whimpering ninkin instead of attempting to engage the man in conversation. When she does that, she's adorable. When she lets out a sigh, in her conversations with her dogs, WH. Once more, a tall man dressed entirely in black interrupted his thoughts. Perhaps Hana would never have noticed him if he hadn't spoken. Hana's cry was ignored by the man, who curtly said, Muta Aburame, the clan head requests your presence at the compound. Without waiting for an answer, he vanished right away. Naturally. Konoha's betrayal plan. That individual. If anything, Torun is a strong supporter of it. The only thing I can do is convince my father to change his mind. He hurried off, doing his best to ignore Hana's cries, and bounded up a building. We're on guard duty, Muta, Muta. I'm sorry, Hana. Just, you have arrived. Shibi said. The clan head's words were nearly overpowered by the constant hum of the Kakaichu as they stood side by side in the clan hives. Yes, father. It has been decided. Tomorrow, the Aburame clan will eliminate the Inuzuka from the equation. Ready yourself, for we do what we must. Father. I implore you, do not go through with this. The Inuzuka are our friends. They have been since the village was founded. Muta continued to speak. With a look of surprise on his face, Shibi turned to face his son. Do you refute the logic of our actions? This is the only way for us to survive. Do you not see? It is our only hope. I understand. Shibi walked to his room and left Muda alone, saying without emotion, "Your control over your emotions is slipping. I am disappointed. Calm down. Come to the meeting room tomorrow morning for the briefing. If everything goes as planned, we attack at sunset tomorrow." Now what should I do? Huge claws snagged at him in an attempt to capture him. Fearful, uncertain, and depressed, he ran. The red-eyed, otherworldly beauty was following him, pleading with him to stop and save her, but he consistently gave in to his fear and failed. The devil himself then showed up. His bare body was rippling with muscles, and his skin was painted red. He had 7 deformed knobs on his head, his horns were glaring down at Naruto, and his lips were adorned with an evil smile. Darkness. The starkness contrasts with realities. It hearkens your soul to me, soon your soul will break, and the pieces will fall through these shattered gates. Who are you? Why are you here? Naruto cried out in terror. Me? I am Akuma. You are human, yet your thoughts are the spawn of demons. You think you are above killing your fellow man, but it all amounts to the same in the end. The mortals call you demon, and they are not far off. The devil replied. He floated in the air, defying normal physics, and his voice was unsettling, as if it were infused with the sorrowful cries of lost souls. His body then erupted in rage, erasing all conscious thought. When he roared, one of the knobs glowed malevolently. Who are you? I want to kill. Why do I want to kill? Oh, you do. Do you? You want to feel the blood. Wrath. You want to feel its power. It makes you invincible, it makes pain intangible, and it gives you the strength you could never have. The devil's voice screamed. Naruto yelled at his tormentor, "Let me out! I want to leave, take me back," sobbing. It was nearly impossible for him to see anything because his vision was blurring. The devil sneered cryptically, "You will return, and you will serve the blood god. When you get angry, your power will be envied." Naruto was then unable to see anything. He had the impression that he was plunging into an endless abyss, and everything was dark. Then, breathing heavily, he opened his eyes. He was on a makeshift stretcher, and he could see the other ninja in their prone positions as he looked around. Like an unholy sacrifice to the devil, their groans filled the room as some were disfigured and others had lost limbs. The devil. You should forget about it, it's all a dream. His final memory was of Kurenai being killed by his adversaries, followed by murdering. God, I remember killing them all. Was it a dream, or did I actually do that? Naruto bounded out of the room and into the village, deciding he had to leave quickly before the sudden flood of memories suffocated him. The boy's mood did not improve even though the sun was shining now. Snow is still on the ground. On the roof of the Hokage's residence was Jiraiya. He frequently thought he would simply pass out because so much had happened in such a short period of time. However, he was aware that Konoha still required him and that he could not afford that luxury. With a sigh, he looked up just in time to see a yellow blur speeding in the direction of the Hokage monument. Is Naruto there? I should speak with him. He was standing atop the Hokage monument, the same spot he visited each time he needed some alone time to reflect. His teacher was waiting for him this time. Naruto shuffled his feet toward Jiraiya. Jiraiya questioned, Naruto, do you remember what happened? The blonde was reminded of too many unpleasant memories by the seemingly straightforward question. Yes. With hesitation, Jiraiya asked, what happened? They took a life. My companion, Kurenai. They raped her, and there was nothing I could do about it. It's nothing. They attacked us on the road, but I chased them off, because I'm strong. Naruto exclaimed with a sudden, broad smile. At this outburst, Jiraiya could only smile pitifully. He's too young to go through that. I made an effort to shield him from the conflict and Orochimaru. However, I've always failed. Unsure of what to say, Jiraiya gestured for his pupil to take a seat. Sitting silently side by side on the stone face of the Yondaime, the two of them watched the sun rise higher in the sky while reflecting. After a few hours as his fellow Aburame, both young and old, hid on the outskirts of the Inuzuka compound, Muda could only look on incredulously. As a natural precaution to make sure the Inuzuka weren't warned in advance, they covered their odor with chakra cloaks. When the clan elders arrived, the Aburame would launch a quick and effective attack, covering the entire compound with their Kakaichu as a single unit. Every living creature would be suffocated by the bugs, which would also deplete their chakra, leaving even Sume Inuzuka helpless. The hooded Aburame patiently prepared for the act by waiting for an hour. At that point, they were noticed by a lone Inuzuka girl. Unable to see 4 winters, she approached with a childlike curiosity while holding a stuffed animal in her small hands. She had not yet earned the right to have war paint inked on her face, so it was smooth and unmarked. Muta was perplexed. She ought to have been taken out. Why is she here? She edged closer, getting closer to the shinobi in black. They appeared to be oblivious to the young girl, standing like statues. She gazed at them with wide eyes, wondering why they were there. Bugs swarmed around her with a finger snap, covering her mouth and preventing her from screaming. The girl struggled to get rid of the bugs and fell to the ground, writhing in futility. Muta could only watch in dismay. The girl's struggles grew more violent as her eyes rolled back, until they finally stopped and her tiny, emotionless arms dropped to the floor. Muta did not know if she died from exhaustion of her chakras or from suffocation. Then it dawned on him. His actions. What he had permitted to occur. To ensure his clan's survival, he watched as a young girl's innocent life was taken. He made up his mind then and there. He was one of his clan's finest Aburame prodigies. However, he was initially a Konoha soldier and would defend it until the end of his life. He refused to let any more innocent people perish. He voluntarily yielded to his feelings and, for the first time, allowed them to control his behavior. He surprised his clan members by sending out his Kakaichu after turning red. He pulled out his kunai and bound them with his bugs. They were unable to speak because their mouths were covered, but he could see their eyes widening. Muta cut the throats of all 20 of his companions as quickly as he could. They remained loyal to Aburame until the end, never showing the slightest sign of emotion. Suddenly, his father showed up in a whirl of leaves directly in front of him. He commanded in a commanding voice, "Muta, I thought you were here. We shall start the attack in 5 miles," without looking around. When he looked around, he saw that 20 Aburame had died, but for him, it was too late. With his eyes pierced, Muta aimed his Kakaichu at his father and cut his throat before he could react. "I do what I have to, and I will kill the elders when they arrive." The elders came in the same twirl of leaves a few seconds later, and Muta always dealt them the same fate as he dealt his father. Until, at last, the anger left him and he found himself standing by himself in the clearing with corpses scattered everywhere. "I succeeded. I took their lives. I have slain every adult in the Aburame clan, which was the smallest in Konoha. No one will ever betray Konoha. I save." A cry of horror came from a short distance away. "Jin, what happened? What?" Muta strode out calmly. Hana Inuzuka was hunched over the little girl's lifeless body, staring at him with all the rage of 1,000 warriors. "The earth's interior I had spent my life creeping around in the shadows. Like the scraps a master throws to his dogs, I was happy with the dregs they threw to me and groveled at their feet where the giants tread. But not anymore. I will no longer shame myself, I will no longer be satisfied with my lot, and I am no longer Aobozu the coward. Father Fox was so great that I briefly thought I might have lost my sight. He towered over us all, as if we were ants, and he was a god. I saw his greatness an eternity ago. I have wished and hoped to one day achieve his power ever since I witnessed him burn with abandoned power, desecration of the very ground he walked on. But now he's gone. There is no doubt that he has fallen. To lose to creatures as small and frail as humans. How far he had fallen to be destroyed and killed by people even less than us was all I could think about. On that faithful day 10 years ago, we both felt and I knew he was dead. His presence vanished, and we were happy because it meant we could now climb. Many people perished in the ensuing chaos, but no one gave a damn about me or bothered with such a weakling. That was the end of them. They misjudged my determination, and now I stand here, having fought, betrayed, and killed, and I've finally gained power." Standing atop a precipice, Aobozu peered out at his army. He assembled an army by lying, cheating, and backstabbing. The Kitsune lived in this abandoned location, far below the surface, where molten magma bubbled and boiled. The walls were cracked and glowed from molten fire, and the ground was blackened and scorched by the hellish heat. Indeed, the Kitsune, elementals as old and ancient as the land itself, called this place home. Aobozu could see the foxes, some big and some small, arguing among themselves from where he stood. They were prepared for battle, snarling, gnashing their teeth, and growling because they thought he would be their new leader. They were eager to prove themselves to the candidate. The father's power was dispersed across the nations after his death. I have been searching for and gathering the shattered pieces of energy for 11 years, and now I am ready to become the Kyuubi. However, there is still one last piece that reverberates throughout the human world. I will acquire that power before the end of the week, and at last, climb. They will go on the rampage across the lands of man at midnight in a few hours, and they will battle and perish against the forces that want to keep me at bay. The few who survive will be my slaves for all eternity, which is a fitting punishment for those who have long mocked me. They are merely instruments with which I can accomplish my goal. I just need a little bit more. A bit more, please. Gamabunta was on the outskirts of Mount Myoboku, leading his warriors. With their gleaming armor, massive shields, and evil swords, the Toad army stood tall and proud in front of him. In square formations, thousands upon thousands of them stood alert, waiting for their great lord's order. Gamabunta sat in silence and watched. His gaze swept across Japan's plains and hills, rivers, and mountains. He waited patiently, keeping an eye out for any indication of the fox spirits. Another Toad appeared beside him, puffing smoke. Gamabunta, Sama, I have received word from Manda. He requested me to deliver the message to the Emperor, although I trust you have better use for this information. Manda has agreed to aid us in battling the foxes, and his kin are ready for battle. Katsuyu and her forces also stand at the ready, and await your signal. Also, your father, honored Fukasaku, has located the last remaining remnant of the Kyuubi's power. It appears to be in the possession of Orochimaru, the snake summoner, and he appears to be somewhere in the land of fire. Understood. Gamikomu. Stay by my side. Once the foxes appear, relay your message to the others to begin the defense. Gamabunta replied sternly, nodding. I'll have to divide my forces because most of the foxes will attack him if he's in the land of fire. However, how did Orochimaru acquire this ability? I know Jiraiya's former teammate is planning something. Kumo War Council the Raikage had grown weary of hearing about failures, growing losses, and withdrawals. Furthermore, his men were yelling gibberish about red-haired, indestructible demons during the last attack, and, incidentally, only the third assault upon Konoha. In order to gather his forces and integrate the recently arrived reinforcements from Kirigakure into the attack plan, the Raikage had since temporarily halted the attacks. The third Raikage was him. Nothing was beyond his capabilities, and nothing could impede Kumo's ascent to power. Nevertheless, the combined forces of 3 of the 5 largest hidden ninja villages were pushed back by the Leaf Ninja. Standing 2 feet tall, the Raikage was a giant of a man. In contrast to his ebony skin, he wore a mane of unruly white hair. A single, jagged scar ran down his torso, severing him all the way down to his abdomen. Because he was the only one capable of matching and defeating the Yellow Flash, Konoha's most formidable warrior, he was feared throughout the nations. He had originally planned to overrun Konoha in 1 or 2 days, but the village had already lasted over a week. The Raikage had witnessed enough battles to know that a standoff might break out if he did not put an end to the conflict within the next 2 to 3 months. In addition, his own forces, which were dispersed across 2 fronts, had the difficult task of preventing Iwa's forces from breaching the boundaries of the Land of Fire. As Junin commanders filed into the tent, he leaned back in his wooden chair and watched without blinking. Even though they were all seasoned veterans, everyone could see how oppressive the gloomy Raikage was. From the oldest to the youngest, they all exhibited respect for the man. They feared his strength and his unparalleled fighting skills. A tall ninja by any measure, the first speaker stood up. With the recent addition of almost 800 Kiri ninja to the invading force, we currently number 2. In a half-thousand combat. Ready shinobi. If another attack is made, we would surely overwhelm Konoha's battered forces. I would recommend an all-out attack assault to be made in the following 7 days. Raikage. Sama. At this, the Raikage boomed in a deep bar. That was what you said last time. Commander Yamashita. As yet, the Leaf spirit is strong, and will not break easily, and they will only fight harder with the arrival of new enemies. Let me make this clear. We will defeat Konoha, one way or another. Whether we stay here for 2 months or 2 years depends on how fast Konoha falls. Do not forget that our border forces are already having a hard time dealing with their Iwa allies. Once Iwa has established secure routes to Konoha, a stalemate would be inevitable. And what of the demon that the imaginations of the assault troops have fabricated? There was a chorus of murmurs at this point. A scarred man from Suna suddenly appeared. It was obvious to all that he had lost an arm in one of the earlier attacks. Raikage. Sama. I was part of the assault group, and I saw the demon. It looked as if it were made up purely of blood, and it had so many legs, almost as if it were an octopus adapted to land travel. Its limbs were hard as steel, and they sliced off my arm. I swear, it really existed. The Raikage decided he had had enough of this pointless meeting and gave a mocking snort. We attack in 3 days. Send a messenger to Kumo. and request for both Jinchūriki to be transported here. Make sure they are kept inside their cages. We cannot afford to have them escaping. Use this time to rest, for in 7 days, we shall destroy Konoha. He then dismissed everyone in his vicinity with a flick of his wrist. The Rampage could no longer hold it, so he rushed back into his own tent after it was empty and knelt down. He coughed uncontrollably and vomited onto the floor. I may have to personally participate in the assault, but I am unable to resist the Hokage in my current state. My illness, damn it. The others would definitely take advantage of it if they learned about it. After I persevere and conceal it from the others for a short while longer, I will be able to do what I have always wanted to do. Hana spat in Muta's face as she raged. You killed her. I can smell the filth of your bugs all over her. I smell blood on you. Who else have you killed? Who else? He felt panic rising inside of him. Muta drew nearer, ready to clarify. Wait. Hana, I did not. The Aburame was suddenly interrupted by Hana's high-pitched scream. Other Inuzuka materialized a few seconds later, encircling him and snarling. At last, Sume Inuzuka, the clan head, herself, fell from the sky. Sume growled and skulked toward Muta, saying, I smell blood. Aburame blood. You have killed your own people. Kinslayer. They pounced together, determined to kill. Muta escaped at the last second, twisting out of the way. He decided to flee after realizing that no amount of explanation could allay the Inuzuka's wrath and anger. Not as easy as it seems. The Inuzuka unleashed their canines on Muta, and they ran toward him, howling for blood and foaming at the mouth. Muta used his Kakaichu to divert their attention with a flick of his wrist, then formed a hand seal and vanished. When he reappeared on a rooftop a while later, he immediately ran for the village gates. Much to his chagrin, the Inuzuka ran after him, chasing him assiduously. They were Konoha's best trackers, and he couldn't possibly outrun them all. He made a number of bug clones with another hand seal, and they broke apart in all directions. He could hear his pursuers' words from behind. Split up. Capture all of them. Taking advantage of the brief distraction, Muta threw all of his chakra into his thighs and charged at the east gate of Konoha. I must get away. If they catch me, it's over. The Aburame quickly arrived at the gates after running as quickly as he could, only to discover Hana Inuzuka, accompanied by her 3 ninkin, blocking his way. Hana spat, nowhere to run, traitor. I can't believe I ever trusted you, Gatsuga. Without saying another word, she sprang forward, synchronizing her attack with her ninkin and spinning her body rapidly. With the intention of puncturing Muta's body, they threw themselves at him as one. Muta barely avoided the attack as he leapt into the air. Hana, I don't want to fight you. I can't put my hand up to the woman I care about. I only took action for you. Hana twisted her body around and attacked again, preventing him from regaining his footing. Gatsuga. Muta ducked once more. He could see that the attacks were poorly targeted. Anger has blinded her. Choosing to fight close to Muta, Hana raced in his direction, roaring unintelligibly and slamming her elbow into his side. Although the attack was easily blocked, the Aburame chose not to take advantage of her brief weakness. I can't harm her. Despite launching a barrage of strong punches and kicks, Hana failed to even strike Muta. She charged blindly, furious, and stumbled over a loose rock. When Muta saw the woman lose her balance, he rushed forward and caught her in mid-air, and abruptly fell to the ground, unconscious, his body supporting Hana. Sume called, We got him. Hana, are you hurt? By throwing a well-aimed poisoned senbon, she was able to render the bug user unconscious. Hana stood up shakily, confused. No, I'm not hurt. Is he dead? Unfortunately, no, I only had a paralyzing poison in my pouch. Come, let us report this incident to the Hokage. The bodies of his clansmen were found dead. Killed by him. He will definitely be executed. Sume replied. Hana sighed as she picked up her former teammate's lifeless body, fighting back tears. Muta, how could you? You murdered her. You murdered Jin. I wish I hadn't been so self-centered. I hid Jin in the compound because I couldn't bear to leave her alone. I wish I hadn't prevented her evacuation. Muta, it's all your fault. Your head will be mine. It is 2 hours prior to midnight. Naruto took a seat on the Hokage's residence's roof. Reports were received hourly, and each one presented a more dire picture of the state of affairs in Konoha. The Hokage had been informed by the Inuzuka a few hours earlier that the entire adult population of the Aburame clan had been murdered. He must be talking about the specifics of the killings. I heard them conversing, and it appears that Muta is the one who did it. I have a feeling that this is more complicated than it first appears. He will, however, be put to death tomorrow if he is fortunate. Otherwise, well, death isn't the only thing that can happen. Naruto did not display any signs of shock upon learning of his former teammate's passing. Although he didn't think Muda was the type to act in such a way, what was he aware of about Aburame? Nevertheless, he did nothing because there was nothing he could do. But what really caught his attention was the moon's color. It was a sickly red and appeared to glow maliciously, and Naruto knew that something significant was about to occur. It was palpable in his veins. It was quiet, and the night was cold. There were no sounds, as though nothing dared to disturb the peace of the night. The trees' leaves had fallen, and the forest appeared to be bare. Gnarled with age and devoid of the familiar green that covered them for 3 of the 4 seasons, the naked trees stood like mournful figures. As if to repel an impending evil, their bare branches resembled the arms of sinners lifted in prayer. There was an odd buzzing coming from beneath the ground. The blonde could not deny the uneasiness that it created, despite the fact that it was subtle, almost like an illusion. Focusing on it, if anything, seemed to aggravate him and remind him of the evil that had stolen his friend. His mind was still reeling from Kurenai's death, but he would persevere because, if not in name, he was a ninja in spirit. He recalled how easily he killed when he was in the grip of his mania and how powerful his anger gave him. Even now, his resolve to never allow the same thing to happen again strengthened the power within him. It had changed from a warm glow to a flaming bonfire that threatened to burst at any second. So he waited, trying to hold on to his power rather than letting himself sleep. Instead of letting it control him, he wished to shape it and exert control over it. Something told him that he was going to have to use it soon. An hour prior to midnight, with a sigh, Jiraiya sank back into his seat. After giving him a thorough account of the incident and its findings, the Inuzuka had just departed. What should I do? How bad is the situation in Konoha? For what reason did Muda Aburame murder his whole clan? So little time, so many questions. The Corps has virtually given up on Konoha, and with the additional psychological and military fallout from this mass murder, Konoha will surely fall. At one point, I thought the village would never end, and I thought I could accomplish anything. As its leader, I now have to deal with its devastation. The white-haired man heard a faint humming in the background. It seemed to intensify his despair and was constant and unrelenting. For some reason, the humming made him extremely irritated, and gradually, that annoyance turned into anger. He turned his head and gazed out the residence's window. A lone malevolent eye, crimson in color, hung high in the sky, watching him, illuminating Konoha with a red tint. Half an hour before midnight, the Rampage stood up straight, allowing his gaze to wander to the distant village. It was a quiet night, almost too quiet for him. He was unable to fall asleep for an unknown reason, so he made the decision to go for a walk outside the camp to decompress. Now he stood on a snow-capped hill, his gray cloak snugly encircling his muscular body. Oh, the village. What motivates them in the face of devastation is a mystery to me. Any rational person would have given up long before. The sudden urge to strike something suddenly overcame him. I get angry just thinking about it. Why don't they submit to our greater strength in numbers? He snarled and threw a single punch that was infused with chakra at a tree, instantly destroying it. He sighed and tried to control his breathing. Nevertheless, their perseverance is commendable. Why do I have such strong feelings about them? Why am I feeling so irate? The Rampage, who was coughing from the slight exertion, returned to his tent and cursed the gods for causing him to become so ill. 0.15 minutes prior to midnight, a certain blonde-haired boy occupied Hinata's thoughts as she looked thoughtfully up at the sky. Naruto-kun. These days, you are the only thing on my mind. I have a lot of questions, and I want to tell you a lot of things. You're where? You went where? Even though I don't have anything to offer in the first place, I would gladly do anything to be with you. Do you have the same sky in front of you? Is the red moon, which seems to weep for our dismal and unfulfilling lives, visible to you? And why do I feel so afraid when I see the moon? I never imagined that I would make friends in this place, but I have done so. A lifetime ago, I could only hope that people would accept me for who I am. However, I don't need or want their respect. No longer. You are the only person who matters to me, Naruto-kun, and I sincerely hope that you will love me and accept me for who I am. Do you still exist? Or are these just a lovesick fool's delirious thoughts? The Shogun's fortress at midnight. Munyoshi yelled frantically, Shogun Sama, you have to see this personally. The Shogun scowled. His most devoted warrior had never before displayed such an expression. He certainly never imagined that the samurai would truly panic one day. After concluding that there was indeed a problem, He stood up and silently followed his subordinate out of the room. Munyoshi approached the battlements half running, half walking, then stopped and pointed to the horizon. The shogun's gaze grew wide. Trees were burning far out in the forest, casting a fiery glow over the night. Trees were uprooted in a terrible clamor of devastation as the ground split and red tides rose from it. More of the red tide emerged from the cratered ground, bursting like pus from an infected wound as explosions rang out. The plain that led up to the fortress then developed cracks. The earth itself split in two, and a raging demon emerged. With its crimson, slitted eyes glazed with madness and its teeth bared in murderous glee, it towered nearly 10 stories high. Raising its enormous claws, the great demon roared into the night and swung at the fortress's stone walls as it drew to its full height. The elemental power the demon seemed to emanate made the men on top of the battlements tremble in terror, but they refused to give up. The shogun roared out his orders, "Man the ballistae! Fire at will," as he recovered from his initial shock. A big piece of rock from the fortress was cleaved by the beast's claw as it made contact with the stone. Men met their demise as they fell, screaming, from the tumbling walls. "Warriors, stand fast! Attack!" yelled the shogun. The ballistae fired in unison, and the bolts pierced the tall demon's hide, causing it to scream in agony. The crossbowmen and archers joined the furious battle as one, unleashing a barrage of bolts and arrows. The beast was now swatting heedlessly at the fortress when the ballistae were reloaded and fired at it once more. When it finally had enough, it collapsed and melted into the ground with a last frightful roar. The shogun exhaled a sigh of relief and looked out to sea, and let out a gasp. From the earth, waves of fox like creatures rose, some no larger than a human and others as tall as the fortress itself. Together, they tore through trees and destroyed the human settlements nearby the fortress as they raged across the terrain. The villages are being destroyed by them. The shogun could only cower in terror from the top of the fortress battlements as sounds of frantic devastation echoed into the night in the distance. Small figures were seen begging for entry and yelling prayers to their gods as they fled down the grand road that led to the fortress itself. "Open the gates. Let them through. Keep the ballistae loaded at all times. Fire when the targets are in sight." The shogun gave the order. Just in front of the fortress gates, more of the damned demons suddenly burst forth from the earth, tearing through the escaping villagers. These were hardly larger than a mature man, but their unparalleled fighting ferocity more than made up for their diminutive size. The men were overrun and their stomachs sliced open as they poured into the opening gates as one. There were squeaky squelches. The kitsune were consuming their victims' bare stomachs. Another demon erupted from the now steaming ground, this one larger than the fortress itself. A flurry of sharpened projectiles flew into the beast as the ballistae twanged once more. The beast didn't even bat an eyelid this time. Then it burst out laughing. The men fell to the ground, trembling with terror at the utter hatred it conveyed, as the terrible, irritating sound reverberated in their ears. "Humans? Trying to battle me? Don't make me laugh, today, you all die?" It lifted its clawed limbs with a roar and crashed into the fortress. The shogun waited for death to take him, closing his eyes. "This is where it ends. I will eventually die after years of politics, rivalries, and acrimonious conflicts." Death, however, did not arrive. The kitsune was smashed by a blurred figure, sending it sprawling into the forest and shaking the ground. A giant toad the size of the demon now squatted where it had been, sword and shield securely grasped in its webbed hands. "Not today, fox." With its shield in hand, the toad sprang at the fox, slamming into it and sending it hurtling deeper into the woods. 1,000 shooting stars appeared to be illuminating the sky, illuminating the heavens like angels descending on the earth. The stars filled the sky, crashing to the ground and making the earth tremble, much like the crimson tides appeared to flood the land as far as the eye could see. Behind the fortress, another star burst into flames. Another enormous toad emerged from the smoke and ran to help its fellows. However, for every toad, 2 more kitsune emerged, wreaking havoc on the land with their foes. It seemed to be a destructive choreography. The toads did their best, slashing, hacking, bashing, twisting, and gyrating, while the fox demons smashed, clawed, snarled, and bit. The stunned men and women who watched the ensuing chaos with morbid fascination were in the center of it all. It would be an understatement to say that the shogun was unable to speak. That elemental rage. This is, in fact, the stuff that makes legends. Back in Konoha, Naruto could only gaze in awe. The demons tore through the village walls and destroyed everything they could get their hands on, sweeping through the forest like a tsunami. In a vain attempt at combat, He bounded toward them despite the rising fear in his gut. Then came the toads. Things dropped out of the sky, revealing themselves to be enormous, shining warriors that were on par with the demons. They moved forward as one, slashing and hacking at the insane foxes in orderly formations. However, the devastation was too great. The toads were pushed back into the village gradually, succumbing to the unrelenting assault. A hissing sound then grew louder until it eventually drowned out all other sounds, like a silent tide of death. Giant snakes that resembled the other titanic warriors rose up from the earth, coiling around the foxes and tightening their bodies until the life was crushed out of them. Their tails whirled around so quickly that they cut off their enemies' heads in quick, fluid movements. With a gesture of bloodthirsty stupidity, Naruto yelled, "Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." Thousands of solid clones materialized, and they all jumped headfirst onto a struggling fox that was engaged in combat with an armored toad. With a growl, the fox struck the clones, knocking out more than a few of them. "Foolish human. You dare attack me? Don't get distracted. Your enemy is me." The toad yelled as he lunged with his sword, taking advantage of his opponent's brief distraction. The demon writhed in agony as the sword went through its breast. The fox's body was cut in two by the toad's forceful downward thrust of the sword. "You are brave, young ninja. You remind me of Jiraiya, the toad Sennin," it said, turning to face Naruto. Naruto, panting, threw out the rest of his clones and jumped on top of the toad's head. "You know Jiraiya, sensei?" Nodding, the toad responded, "So he is your teacher. Iamgamaken, one of the protectors of Mount Myoboku. Perhaps you may be able to aid me in this battle. Stay on my head and be careful." Naruto was left fighting for his life as he then charged back into the fray. A short distance from Konoha, flushed by the events of the day, Jiraiya exclaimed, "Gamabunta. What's happening? I have to deal with a war with Kumo, another war between God knows who, and a mass murder. I have a terrible life." "Just quiet down, boy. If you must know, the foxes are turning the land of fire upside down trying to find the last remnant of the Kyuubi's power," Gamabunta said. In an attempt to locate Orochimaru, he was running through the forest as quickly as he could. Confused, Jiraiya exclaimed, "The Kyuubi's power? He's sealed inside Naruto." Gamabunta snorted, irritated at Jiraiya's apparent lack of knowledge. "The Kyuubi's dead. Get that into your thick head. Now shut up. We have to find Orochimaru. It seems he is in possession of the final fragment of the Kyuubi's power. How he came to acquire it I do not know." "What the fuck? I just discovered that Orochimaru has some secret power and Naruto does not possess the Kyuubi. That must have been what he was searching for the last time he visited the village." Now that he thought about it, the Hokage suddenly realized what he was doing and took Naruto's remaining power. "The prison cells in Konoha, it's all going to end tomorrow. I'm going to be put to death. There was so much more I had wanted to do." Muda sat by himself in the dank prison cell, thinking about what he had done. No, it's too late. He was startled out of his reverie by an explosion, and he could hear the distant cries of combat and feel the earth trembling. What was it? Another attack? This is my opportunity to get away. He crept over to the iron bars of his cell and saw that there were no guards in sight, wondering what could justify even the lack of prison guards, but at least there would be fewer people to contend with. They didn't even bother to separate my Kakaichu or suppress my chakra, and Muda summoned all of the Kakaichu that resided inside his body, compressing them into a ball and sending them hurtling toward the bars, smashing the gates apart. How complacent. He slipped silently out of the prison complex, and oddly, there was not a guard in sight, only the faint snoring of a few other unfortunate inmates. At last, he arrived at the entrance, but it was locked. "I can take advantage of this and escape." Muda decided he could stand no more confinement, so he smashed the portal open and gasped at the scene of devastation. Great beasts towered over the village, engaged in battles of humongous proportions. Then he said, "Please keep safe, Hannah. I promise I will meet you again, and when I do, I'll explain the truth," and ran off toward the south gate, the opposite direction of where the battles were being fought. He was not particularly distracted by the thumping footsteps. The most delicious devastation to ever touch this world was bestowed upon his eyes. It was amazing. Every time I see it, its beauty grows, it never gets old. That was my wish. A crazy person's wish. The wish of a kid who has been lost. To go through the world's worst and best. However, I didn't feel sad or curse my circumstances. I accepted this fate and will see it through to the end. I recall those joyous times. I cherished our friendship's purity. However, I was tainted from the start, and I will continue to be tainted until the end. Orochimaru took pride and pleasure in the elemental rage that swept through the land of fire as he sat cross-legged at the cliff's edge. Mountains were split, lives were lost, and fire raged everywhere he looked. The seal etched into his flesh was concealed by the tight grip of his right hand. I have a power in my hand. It is insignificant and unimportant on its own. But it is necessary, like a piece of a puzzle. Necessary for the completion of a complex, powerful being. Isn't that incredible? Despite being a small and inconsequential piece, it gains significance due to its affiliation. As a result, they destroy the land, murder innocent people, and consume human flesh. To the top of the icy cliff floated the distant sounds of combat. It sounded to him like an orchestra of chaos, the music of war. Lesser mortals' hearts were stirred and their minds moved by the earth's recurring booming, which was like the percussion that accompanied the masterpiece. I hear them approaching. Their footsteps are menacing, resonating with age-old strength. They advance steadily, crashing through any barrier and pushing aside all impediments. Since they are aware of their desires, and they'll get it. He was flung skyward and debris rained down on the ground as the cliff exploded. Orochimaru quickly regained his balance and pulled himself up to his full height. The smoke obscured the view, making it impossible for the snake summoner to see. He remained where he was, standing motionless and watching with composure. The smoke then dissipated, and a maroon beast unlike any other squatted in its place. Its strength smothered the nearby trees and filled the air with a suffocating intensity. Despite having fox-like features, it appeared more like a dragon than any other animal, and it had a permanent snarl etched on its face. It was a powerful creature that was many times larger than even the largest member of his legion. Orochimaru appeared to it as a dust mite in front of a god. It growled, "You know what I want." It had a deep bassoon voice that rumbled like a waterfall hitting rocks. A smirk slowly appeared on Orochimaru's face. He turned and walked away with dramatic slowness, as though teasing the creature in front of him. With a roar of unadulterated fury, the fox swung its talons down on the man. The impact struck the ground with the force of 1,000 earthquakes, creating a deep gulf in the ground. The sheer force uprooted trees and threw them into the air. Farther away, however, Orochimaru reappeared unharmed, standing atop a tree and gazing back at the beast with a cheeky smile on his lips. Such strength! How beautiful! I desire it! At that moment, another figure swooped down from the sky and slammed to the ground. It was an enormous toad. And, of all things, a toad. Jiraiya is running late. A familiar white-haired man, tall and regal, rode atop the toad, despite being smaller than the fox. Demon, its ancient voice betrayed its age and wisdom. Orochimaru, we have come for you. With damnable smugness, Orochimaru answered, so you have. Jiraiya was struggling to control himself. After what he had done, it was enough to make him furious to see his teammate after all this time. Nevertheless, he was able to relax and remain silent, his eyes barely squinting. He is mine. No one else will touch the power. The great fox erupted in rage, obviously upset by the newcomers. The fox lunged at the giant toad, his claws bared and his teeth bared. The toad drew its sword and ducked the blow with extraordinary speed. The impact of the sword's blade striking the fox's razor. Sharp talons reverberated throughout the landscape, causing trees to be flattened by the force of the sound waves. The toad swatted the claw away and slashed at the fox's middle, saying, so you are the new aspirant. You do not even come close to Kurama. The fox was furious and snatched the sword from his adversary's hands with its bare hands. Do not compare me to him. He was defeated by humans. The fox twisted to Gamabunta's side with incredible speed, openly slicing the toad's belly to reveal his guts. The toad grunted in agony and rushed back, using his left hand to cover its open wound. Cackling, the fox cried out, so you are all talk. Die. It launched itself so forcefully that it left 4 enormous footprints on the ground and struck the toad directly, sending both of them plummeting into a cliff. At the last second, Jiraiya leapt and ran across the bare treetops until he was directly in front of Orochimaru. Jiraiya gritted his teeth and said, Orochimaru, I will only say this once, give it to me. Orochimaru did not even bother to respond to his former teammate, he just stood there. Rasengan. Jiraiya roared as he charged a ball of chakra in his right hand and hurled himself at Orochimaru. He vanished, only to reappear on the ground before Jiraiya could get to him. Cackled. The snake summoner looked up and said, I have become much more powerful than you could ever dream to be. Already, immortality is in my grasp. Jiraiya hurled himself downward, his hand humming with blue power, his face twisted in anger. A massive explosion tore through the forest as he collided with the earth, slamming the sphere of energy into the ground. There was no sign of Orochimaru. The already enraged Hokage was confused and enraged by his distorted voice, which seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. You want so badly to save your village, your country. A pity you aren't powerful enough. Shut up. You may have abandoned Konoha, but I'll do everything in my power to protect it, Jiraiya yelled. His voice was raised, but the shock waves from the distant battle between the ancient beings nearly drowned him out. With each blow, the ground shook, and Jiraiya realized he was running out of time. Gamabunda's chances of survival are slim. He assured me that the toads could drive the foxes back to their territory if I could take control of Orochimaru's power. The forest was filled with the sound of laughter. So did you. And Tsunade. We all abandoned that cursed village, and you deem yourself fit to lecture me? Pathetic. Orochimaru emerged from beneath the earth and kicked Jiraiya in the groin, taking him by surprise. The white-haired man fell to the ground, doubling over in agony. I've always been stronger than you, as I'll always be. You wish to aid the toads in getting rid of the foxes. Believe me, as much as I revel in destruction, I too want them gone. I can't be ruling over a wasteland for the rest of eternity, can I? Still, we'll do this my way. I humbly request your aid, if you would so kindly give it. Orochimaru sighed. Jiraiya suddenly leapt to his feet and seized Orochimaru with terrifying vigor. Fuck you. You die now, traitor. Hari Jizo, Needle Jizo. His hair grew longer and hung like a cloak over his and Orochimaru's bodies. The hair cloak hardened with a sudden expansion, the spiky strands piercing Orochimaru's body like a piece of paper. Orochimaru struggled and hissed in agony, unable to move. His many puncture wounds were gushing blood, and his body appeared to have been stabbed a dozen times. He never lost his smirk, though. He lifted his head and his maw widened unnaturally. With sickened fascination, Jiraiya watched as the previous, torn body was replaced by a new, undamaged body that came out of the mouth. What the hell is that? Jiraiya spat, his voice trembling with disgust. Orochimaru just flashed his twin fangs from his new body. I've told you, I have found the secret to immortality. All I need now is a little something to acquire it. It appears you will be of no use. Die then. A serpent sprang from his mouth, its jaws opening to reveal a pale, razor-sharp blade. Jiraiya was too late to respond. He grunted as the pain registered in his brain after the sword impaled him through his chest. Orochimaru felt a twinge of emotion as he pushed the sword down, cutting through Jiraiya's internal organs. Konoha was around 42 years ago. Hatred, loneliness, pain. I have lived a brief, cursed life, and that is all I have ever known. I witnessed my parents being killed in front of me, and I could feel the warmth and moisture of the blood as it trickled down my cheeks. Through the limited vision I was given, I watched as the men raped my sobbing mother and filled her with their tainted seed until she was nothing more than a trembling mess while I sat in the cupboard, scared and hidden. Then, as I watched in horror, they cut strips of meat from my mother's corpse after slitting her throat. Food, they declared. You can never have enough of it. The war has made all of us hungry and starving. Food, I thought to myself as my eyes widened, cannibals. I felt sick. I was aware that cannibals were common during the Third Shinobi War, a period marked by famine and death. Bile was still rising in my stomach, though. Until only bloodied bones and my mother's frightened face were left, I watched as the men kept chopping and hacking away. After that, they left the house. I was so terrified that I dared not leave the protection of the dark. After all, I was from a civilian family, so I had no idea how to defend myself, and it wouldn't have helped much. The men were clearly ninja based on their gait and the muscle visible on their bodies, even though they didn't wear headbands. Most likely, they had gone rogue because they were sick of fighting. I didn't know how long I sat there, however, I could hear the men's voices in the distance. Then I recalled the smell of fried meat filling my nostrils and the sound of sizzling flesh. I was aware that my mother's flesh was being cooked. Was it incorrect of me to feel my mouth watering? I was naturally hungry after going a day without eating, so I had no idea. I waited for hours while my thoughts were racing with all the terrible ways I could pass away. Even if I had wished for death, it did not come. At last, I was at my breaking point. With all of my strength screaming in terror, I slowly forced myself out of my hiding place. I went outside slowly, and exhaled a breath of calm. The men had left. Then I turned to see my father's swaying body on that twisted oak tree, strung up by his intestines. I was at my breaking point. I felt the anger, the disgust, and the fear rising inside of me. How could I have earned such a fate? Why me? I fell to the ground, crying and throwing up all at once. Then I came to a halt. There's no point in crying now. In order to exact revenge on my parents, I had to live. I promised all the pagan deities that I would hold them accountable for their actions. I would bring about a thousandfold worse fate. I made a self-promise to completely destroy them. I just knew that I was angry and that I needed a way to let it out, but I had no idea what I was thinking at the time. I entered my house, stifled my tears, and picked up a kitchen knife. I was only a child, and up until the day before, I had led the happiest life possible. Even as I cut my mother's head down from the heap of ragged bones, her face marred by mucus and dried tears, I was still fuming with rage over what had been taken from me. I would take my mother's head with me and bury it when I reached a suitable location because I couldn't bear to leave her like this. Then I started moving. There was no way for me to get to my father's body. From what I remembered, he was a good man, so I paid my last respects by bowing to his corpse. I journeyed through the forest and across plains for days and weeks. There was a lot of food here, and I consumed all the fruits and berries that were in season. I didn't know where I was or where I was heading. I just walked. I might as well have gone around in circles. Subsequently, I arrived at the vast, desolate desert. I foolishly jumped into it without knowing anything about it. I nearly died as a result. For 2 days, I walked aimlessly without finding any food or water. I eventually collapsed on the 3rd day after using up all of my limited supplies. A child's body could only withstand so much. I finally had enough of hunger and thirst to drive me insane. I tore open my bag, pulled out my mother's rotting head, and ate it. There was no other way to live. Even though I was unable to cry, my heart was still crying over what I had done. Her meat had a tough, dry texture and was raw and bitter. I told myself that I needed the energy to live. After that, I set out once more and eventually arrived at the forest on the 4th day. Even though I broke my vow many years later, I vowed never to set foot in the desert again. I traveled with my mother's skull for a few more weeks. I'm not sure how many, still determined to find a suitable place for her to be buried. For some reason, there was less food here, and the vegetation was much thinner. I had at last returned to civilization. I remember the exact sensation of elation as I stood there looking at the massive double gates of Konoha, which stood tall in the distance. My family had never really interacted with people because they had lived close to the mountains. I was so hungry that I staggered into Konoha. Had it not been for a young girl, I would not have survived my fall at the massive wooden gates of Leaf Village. Maybe it would have been better if I remembered how near I had been to crossing over to the afterlife. But I was saved by the young girl. She told me that even though I was only 8 years old at the time, my eyes were already dead and lifeless. What brought me back, though, was the girl with her blonde hair blowing in the wind. Where others abandoned me, she lifted me up, took me to her home, and tended to my medical needs. She'd said, "What's your name?" My parents' deaths were still fresh in my mind, so I chose not to respond. She had pressed, "Please, don't act like that. Where are your parents?" I recoiled, swatting her hand away. I recalled the anguished expression in her eyes, the one that informed me that my refusal to be open with her had caused her pain. Because we were kids. She was still innocent and did not comprehend, but I was unavoidably scarred. She had left with tears in her eyes, and I had assumed she would never return. She did, however, return to bring me dinner. I ate in silence, thankful for the life, saving food but not expressing my appreciation. She had placed me in a bed, and I was too weak to move. It had to be her bed. I felt the impulse to speak, but did my best to remain upright. I like snakes. She was taken aback by my abrupt statement. She was curious and had to ask, "Why is that?" I was unable to respond to her. I have always been fascinated by snakes. I could still picture my mother's disgusted expression when she discovered me playing with those forest snakes. She had scolded me, saying I was fortunate they weren't poisonous. She chose to give me a nickname because I wasn't going to reveal my real name to her. "Well, I hope you're comfortable. Orochi-san. I have to tell my father about you, but I'll be back soon." She abandoned me to my nightmares, her eyes sparkling. I quickly found out that she was Tsunade Senju. She had received ninja training as a result of her membership in a prominent clan and was an expert in all facets of the shinobi arts. Nonetheless, most people avoided me. To them, I was strange. I was a stranger, someone they had never met, and as such, I was automatically shunned. My odd fascination with all things serpentine likely did not help my reputation, and as a result, I was always called Orochimaru. The Hokage at the time, Hiruzen Sarutobi, gave me a small, run-down apartment to live in. I then enrolled in the Konoha Academy, just like the other kids, and received a monthly stipend. It was a comfortable life, but I couldn't ignore the darkness that was beginning to grow inside of me. Although the war was coming to a head, Konoha was feared for its superior military power, so life there was good. However, while the other kids played together and relished their time with their parents, all I could think about was the harsh reality of the world. A vicious cycle of violence persisted outside the village's boundaries. I was only able to stew in my rage during it all. If not for Tsunade. She was as radiant as the sun, and somehow, spending time with her helped me forget all of my troubles. I gradually came to enjoy her company, and years later I discovered that I was unable to ignore my emotions. Then there was Jiraiya, my only other friend. I saw him for the first time the year I received my academy degree. Like me, he was being shunned, beaten, and harassed. Although I was unaware of the cause, I felt a connection to this boy. I saw as the bloodied fists hammered on his broken face, bruising and splintering it. He was a little runt at the time, incapable of even properly defending himself. Meekly, he raised his hands, but the aggressors seemed to be encouraged by his weakness. I detested him when I first saw him. Seeing his weakness made me think of my own. Seeing the laughing Inuzuka boys beat him to the ground made me think of the laughing men raping my mother. Given his inability to defend himself against a few genin, how could such a person ever aspire to become a ninja? Nevertheless, I felt sorry for him. I had been in that situation before, and I detested it in myself. I was aware that he also detested himself. After a few minutes of observing and debating whether or not to leave them alone, the white-haired runt finally passed out from the agony. At last, I was at my breaking point. With the intention of making them pay, I charged into the battle and engaged them in the Fundamental Academy Taijutsu. With a snarl on my face, I boldly faced the other three after shocking them by knocking out two of them. I attacked them with a barrage of punches, releasing all of my repressed rage. I give them credit for giving me a few solid hits, however, they were pitiful. Despite being 5 genin, only one academy student managed to defeat them. I smashed their faces and covered my clothes in blood as I beat them to the ground. I finally dropped my arms to the side, panting with exhaustion. The white-haired boy must have been pretending to be unconscious because I could see his eyes on me. His voice was trembling and pathetic as he asked, "Why did you help me? Nobody helps me." I yelled back at him, "Because you couldn't help yourself. You are not fit to be a ninja, fool." He managed to look outraged in spite of the circumstances. Given his split lip, I must admit it was a humorous sight. "Hey, I'm going to be the Hokage one day. Nobody tells me what to do," he had been shouting. "The day you become Hokage will be the day I betray Konoha. Get up, your weakness is infuriating," I responded, laughing. He pushed himself to his feet nervously. "Did you do this to them? They look to be in pretty bad shape. Leave them. They deserve a few weeks of hospitalization if they can't beat an academy student like me," I yelled. He continued to hang around me ever since, always laughing and shouting in that upbeat voice. Admittedly, I enjoyed that. One did not become Kami no Shinobi, god of ninja, by sitting around doing nothing but twiddling his thumbs. The Hokage was a strong man. It appears that he had been observing us, tracking our development, and evaluating our performance. Being constantly watched was unsettling. I was assigned to my genin team, which was led by the Hokage himself, after I graduated from the academy. Jiraiya and Tsunade were my teammates, and to be honest, I wouldn't have it any other way. Our first day together, on the Hokage residence's roof, is still fresh in my mind. The third was very clear about his expectations of us. "I have been watching all 3 of you, and the friendship you have developed is a powerful force. I have taken you as my pupils, my only pupils, because I truly believe you have what it takes to become the best." Jiraiya's smile was so contagious that you could practically feel it. "From now on, I will concentrate on molding your talents and making you the most powerful ninja the land has ever known, because I believe that you 3 will finally bring peace to the world, and because I know that you have enough determination to achieve your goals," the Hokage had stated. "We would become known as the Densetsu no Sannin, legendary 3 ninja, and establish ourselves in the ongoing shinobi war years later." I recall our affection for each other. Unfortunately, my desire for power outweighed our friendship. The only thing that gave me direction in life was Tsunade, whom I adored and longed to have. Once more, I have to feel sorry for the light's ease of extinguishment. I was among the most formidable ninjas to have ever set foot on the planet. Nevertheless, she decided to turn me down and go after her own love elsewhere. Then, as I knelt on the ground and gazed up at the sky, I detested myself. However, I didn't cry, and I hadn't since the night my parents passed away. I threw myself into my work and tried outlawed techniques to increase my strength. However, I realized then that strength was never the key. I would accomplish my teacher's goals in my own way by bringing the world under my control and imposing peace on everyone. I was aware that it would take more than one lifetime to accomplish. Thus, the pursuit of immortality became synonymous with my quest for strength. When I could get my hands on them, I experimented, first on the bodies of grown civilians and later on ninja. I nearly had second thoughts when I first started using children. They screamed for their moms and fought in vain. But for the sake of the world, I hardened my heart. I was unable to separate myself from the darkness. Afterward, he drew the sword, causing Jiraiya to fall to the ground. Orochimaru let out an unusual sigh and ran off, leaving Jiraiya to bleed out into the ground. Some tiny part of him, something human, kept him from killing his old friend himself, even though he had killed, maimed, and mutilated children, even going so far as to skew their bodies and minds. Weakness has no place in this world. The foxes are about to be defeated, and the hibernation period for the Kyuubi's chakra integration is almost over. I'll soon have power beyond my wildest expectations. Orochimaru laughed to himself and drove off into the night. Young Naruto, the foxes are scaling the mountain. Are you aware of any settlements in that vicinity? Gamaken asked. Naruto struggled to stay upright on the toad's head despite being more tired than he had ever been in his life. Gamaken's amphibious body was already covered in black bruises and several deep gashes from the fierce battle against the crimson-eyed demons. Other armored Anurans stood to his left and right, serving as a barrier against the relentless hordes. The demon monstrosities were tearing through the forests as far as the eye could see, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. Regardless of how many were taken down, more always replaced them. Even the last of the Konoha ninja, who were hardly a threat to the adversaries, were doing their best to assist by throwing jutsus to divert the angry animals. The mountains. Wait! That's where the Konoha safe houses are located. Jiraiya ordered them evacuated before Kumo launched its first attack. Naruto began to scream. Among them is Hinata-chan. The toad huffed, "You humans, always making war." Naruto sneered, "I could say the same for you spirits. Let's get going. As long as I still breathe, I shall not let any demon harm the citizens of Konoha." The rascal Jiraiya would have asked no less of us. Gamaken sighed. He brought his sword down and sliced the smaller fox demon in two, avoiding another vicious cut from his opponent. Subsequently, he let out a loud croak and spoke incoherently to a few of his fellows. A few of the enormous toads left the fight with admirable speed, following Gamaken's example, and Naruto watched in awe. The screams, croaks, and snarling of the remaining fighters were overshadowed by the Anaran's rapid ascent up the mountain, which was beyond the comprehension of the average human. Naruto was buffeted by the wind, which caused his eyes to water and sting. As they rose higher, he looked around and was astounded by what he saw. Tiny specks of light bloomed everywhere, glimmering in the night's darkness. The amount of damage that had been done in a matter of hours left him speechless. The toads kept going up the natural formation until the incline lessened and they found themselves back on comparatively level ground. Naruto saw 1,000 demons scaling the sheer cliff, using their claws as hooks to push themselves up. As he peered out from the top of the toad's head once more, they had arrived at the mountain summit and the start of the mountain range that spanned the entire land of fire. Naruto told Gamaken, according to Jiraiya, "Sensei, the safe houses are located behind the mountain range down at the base. It hugs the face of this particular mountain." He pointed behind himself. Gamaken gave the other toads a nod of agreement while yelling some incomprehensible words. Then he said to Naruto, "We will be defending this area and concentrate on preventing the vermin from climbing the cliff face. It is a much better alternative to descending once again to the normal altitude. Here, we hold the high ground. But if things go badly, we may have no choice but to regroup down at the safe houses." Jiraiya's eyes filled with tears. Once more, I have failed. His vision became speckled with black, and he soon found himself falling into the shadows. He was aware of the constant trembling on the ground and the faint sound of thunder, but he ignored them. After all, he needed to focus on the road to the afterlife. Gamabunta swore. He sensed Jiraiya's life force waning and Orochimaru's presence fading. "I need Jiraiya's assistance, but it's too late." He was obviously no match for his opponent's sheer strength and ferocity. The fox had inflicted multiple, freely bleeding gashes, but none were as deep as the first. Gamabunta, panting with fatigue, made the decision to flee. He used his remaining strength to smash his sword's hilt onto the demon's abdomen, blowing it backwards in the process. Gamabunta was in motion, leaping back to Jiraiya's position before its enormous bulk even touched the ground. He sheathed his sword, holding Jiraiya's bleeding and limp body in one hand while covering his open wounds with the other, ignoring the angry roar that roared behind him. He wasted no time in racing back toward Konoha. All he could do was hope he arrived in time to save Jiraiya. Death was a truly unstoppable tide that was now visible to Naruto. There would always be more toads, no matter how many were crushed, ripped apart, or impaled. The snarling demons continued to arrive, even the terror they had radiated before gradually waning. Now he just felt hopeless. Cut, slash, retreat, and avoid. Midsection exposed. Stab. Swinging downward, split apart. They were aware of their impending death. No other end was in sight. The defense was pushed back inexorably until the last of the toads could stand it no longer. One by one, the 10 amphibians that were still alive bounded backward in a disciplined retreat, landing at the base of the cliff and leaving a crater in the ground. He turned to face the safe houses of Konoha. Although they were merely haphazardly arranged wooden structures, there were so many of them that they covered the whole plain. It dawned on him then how many people lived in them. There are 5,000 civilians in Konoha. 10 toads and 1 Naruto stood between a swarm of raging demons and 5,000 lives. The people of Konoha had poured out of their temporary dwellings and were rapidly observing the scene in front of them. Noises of unholy conflict reverberated throughout the night, feeding their fears and superstitions. The subjects of their myths and nightmares now confronted them. Driven by this epiphany, Naruto prepared himself. He would give it his all, even if it meant dying. Now they were at the mountain's foot. They could see demons spilling out onto the summit as they looked up. Then the fire started to pour down. The beasts leapt like fiery comets, laughing wildly as they went. Many of them were crushed by their own relatives as they hit the ground. Nevertheless, they charged ahead despite the Anaron's uncompromising defense. The mountain's base is narrow, at least. For us, that is a sufficient blessing. They can't encircle us that way. We will eventually run out of energy. One by one, Naruto proceeded to create clones, sending them into the battle in a suicidal succession. The beasts were so crazed that they were distracted by a single shadow clone and swung at them mindlessly, allowing the amphibious protector's sharp swords to attack them. Now, drenched in sweat and shaking with fatigue, the blonde was panting. He couldn't remember how many clones he had created. His willpower was the only thing keeping him awake. He had no idea how long he had stood there. The fact that he stood and fought was all that mattered. The toads fell one by one until Naruto and his flagging companion were the only ones left. Now it's over. This is where he would perish. Naruto was certain. I wonder if expecting this to turn into another near-death experience is too much to ask. And his wish came true. And then a light came from far up in the dark sky. The demons ceased, and the area was enveloped in a thick silence. Naruto heard a baby crying somewhere. Everyone who dared to look at it was blinded by the explosion of light, which filled the sky with the brightness of 1,000 suns. Like pure water, the white light swept across the landscape, cascading down the mountains and cliffs. They heard screams and howls everywhere. The fox's death cries were like clear water, washing the land clean of corruption's taint. They were driven insane by the agony of their burning flesh as the light burned them alive. The only reason Naruto opened his eyes again after being briefly blinded by the dazzling radiance was to see the spirit that had ensured his safety die. Gomaken the toad's body melted when the light hit him, his skin sizzling from the heat, his sword still raised in a gesture of defiance. When he looked at Naruto, all he could manage was a dejected smile. Then he and all of his enemies vanished, leaving Naruto dangling in midair. He fell to the ground, face down, a second later. He turned and lay with his back to the sky, spluttering. There was nothing else he could do. Naruto exhaled a sigh of relief at having made it through the longest night of his life as dawn quickly approached and the first rays of sunlight began to peek through the clouds. Oh, it was the first time I survived the near-death experience without passing out. I suppose it counts for something. A familiar, reassuring feeling came over him. One Hinata Hyuga was running toward him and embracing him when he turned around. He briefly lost his train of thought and was happy to lie in her arms while inhaling her lavender aroma. Hinata stood up suddenly, flushed, as though she had just noticed the close contact between herself and the blonde. Naruto was taken aback and instantly felt the loss. Huh? Hinata, what's up? After such a terrifying night, it was all he could think to say. Hinata remained silent. Oh, I came to give him a hug because I was so glad to see that he was all right. We all saw him fighting for us, for the whole village. I gave him a hug. Naruto pushed himself to his feet, oblivious as ever to the blossoming shade of red that was taking over Hinata's face. The blonde forced himself up despite his body's protests at the slight exertion. Hey Hinata? I'm really glad to see you're okay. Those monsters were really tough, but I guess they got scared and ran away. He laughed. Then his expression darkened and he turned his head away. But I guess I have to thank that toad for helping me out. He was a true friend, even though I met him just a few hours ago. Once more, Hinata was prodding her fingers together. The nervous tic would never go away, no matter how hard she tried. Why? Yeah. Hinata's head was bowed anxiously as Naruto turned back to her. Hinata? His uncontrollable statement made Hinata jump a little, and she slowly looked him in the eye. I'm really happy to see you're safe. Hinata gave herself permission to smile. Sadly, the battered remains of the Kumo invasion force chose to show up right then and there. Suddenly a whole battalion of ninjas showed up, albeit with a noticeable amount of wear and tear. The dark, skinned, white-haired giant that landed directly in front of them was the most noticeable. His gloomy gaze seemed to be enough to make anyone cower, and he radiated pure power. From behind Naruto came a few muffled gasps. He drew his kunai and shoved Hinata behind him, alert at once. How in hell did they get here? Damn it. Deeply scowling, the giant said, such a pitiful sight. Konoha leaves the lives of their people in the hands of children. It has been a long night, and it has made me very angry. The ninjas are foolish, they have no idea when to leave well alone. Naruto could see the terrified civilians' faces when he looked back. For all he knew, they might as well have been 5,000 ants, but they were no match for the ninja who came before them. Then Hinata appeared. Something inside him told him that he could not allow her to be harmed for an inexplicable reason. Naruto charged forward into the enemy's waiting arms, gaining strength from his rage reserves. And I still haven't had enough retribution for Kurenai. A short while prior to Orochimaru ran up the hill's sharp slope, pumping his legs as fast as he could. Even skilled ninja would have a difficult time identifying him because he was hardly more than a blur, with his long black hair blowing in the wind and his slitted eyes glinting in the moonlight. The pale man could feel the buck and heave of the earth as ominous footsteps boomed behind him. The oppressive presence was only getting closer. Orochimaru accelerated even further, charging ahead seemingly unhindered. The demon is tenacious. This would have been much simpler if Jiraiya had agreed to help. The demon energies are no longer in hibernation. Based on my calculations, the demon's chakra must have already formed a bond with my chakra system. But despite the strength that flows through me, I am unable to confront the Kyuubi aspirant. My final opportunity is at the top of this hill, where my best work is displayed in all its splendor. I have spent the last 3 years building a seal array that is more powerful and sophisticated than even the nation's top seal masters could possibly hope to create. I hear it coming. Its presence adds ungodly filth to the air. Its final demise will come from its fury. Despite his speed, the terrible crashing sounds were only getting closer to him. Orochimaru could hear the ragged breathing and sporadic roars of the beast because it was so close. Orochimaru finally arrived at the hill's top. It was not as high as the distant mountains, but it provided him with a panoramic view of the devastation engulfing the land of fire. Demons were already overrunning the land and destroying both large and small human settlements. From border to border, it appeared as though a fire was burning, devouring everything in its path. Orochimaru permitted himself a small smile upon realizing that Konoha was merely a blazing bonfire, with the tips of the flames rising high enough to lick the ragged edges of the mountains. The whole thing is ironic. The great tree's leaves are only cultivated to increase the intensity of its fire. Orochimaru started using his newfound strength in preparation for the last battle. The entire summit was covered in black symbols that snaked across the ground. The black glyphs on the ground turned blood red and pulsed with demonic fire as the pale man started to flash through hand seals. I have spent many hours writing magical symbols into the ground for this very moment. I cannot afford to make a mistake because I am the one who must ensure the Land of Fire's survival. Before I conquered it, I wouldn't let it be destroyed. It is my masterpiece, more powerful than all the seals in the Land of Fire combined, and even more powerful than the prohibited Fuinjutsu, Genryu Kyufujin, sealing technique, Phantom Dragon's 9 consuming seals, used by the Akatsuki to free the Biju from their hosts. Sealing technique 600 dot and 40,000. Pronged Sage Sealing, Fuinjutsu, Rokujuyaman no Senin Fuin. I'll be able to compel every spirit to return to their respective realms with this seal. If necessary, forever. The enormous draconic demon suddenly erupted into the scene, roaring with annoyance and poised to rip the impudent mortal in its path to destruction. Give me the power now. Give it to me. The pale man finished all 400 seals required to activate the seal before the demon could slam Orochimaru into a bloody pulp. Too late. Fuinjutsu. Rokujuyama no Senin Fuin. Orochimaru sneered, slamming his palm into the ground. As if to repel whatever Orochimaru had in store for it, the monstrosity lifted its forearms and bared its teeth in rage. There was silence. Nothing took place. The pale man scowled and swore. His curse was the first he had ever used. Cursing was never the first thing on his mind, regardless of the circumstance. It was the only thing he could do, unfortunately. Fuck? What the fuck happened? With a deep, throaty laugh, the demon threw back its head, as if it realized whatever the mortal had planned had failed. Fuck indeed. Without further delay, it bared its claws and stabbed the man directly. Immediately above the ceiling array, a bright light burst into the sky. The demon was flung backwards by the explosion of the light before it could reach Orochimaru. The beast rose again, its skin steaming and bubbling from the agonizing radiance, and snarled in agony. No, it's mine, Mine. The fox demon then vanished into thin air, but not before glaring at Orochimaru with the most hatred in history. Then there was silence as the light went out. The former Sannin collapsed to the ground, exhausted, and allowed darkness to engulf him. If appearances could kill. Konoha just in time to witness another enormous fox crash into the hospital. Jiraiya was returned to the world of the living. It had removed the entire roof and was now looking at about 50 men who were writhing and groaning. When he attempted to stand up, a wave of pain shot through his nervous system, causing his muscles to twitch and nearly knock him out. Just next to the fox, a well-known figure landed, cutting off its head and tossing its vaporizing body back. Gee. Gamabunta. Croaked Jiraiya. He swore to himself, too weak to even call out to his friend. Gamabunta turned, as though he could sense his friend was awake, and gazed down at the pathetic scene. Jiraiya. Rest now. My comrades will protect this village unto the death. You are too weak to do anything, was the obvious hidden meaning. Simply go to sleep. Together, we will all awaken in hell. Jiraiya asked feebly, where is Naruto? Always thinking about others. My friends tell me he rushed to defend the safe houses against the demons. Gamabunta stated. Naruto. This is not where you can die, you have to live. The sky brightened abruptly, as though 1,000 suns had suddenly decided to rise. To Jiraiya's surprise, Gamabunta even flinched, as if hurt, as howls of pain reverberated throughout the village. The sound of combat abruptly stopped. With his back to Jiraiya, Gamabunta's skin seemed to be boiling, as though hot oil had been poured on him. He shut his eyes. Gamabunta was no longer there when he opened them again. Even the wounded ninja held their breath. There was silence. It was unsettling to feel the sudden calm. The sky darkened slowly once more. A ninja without arms stood with wide, terrified eyes. He was identified as a Hyuga by his otherworldly white pupils. As he walked slowly to the door, all eyes were on him. After opening the portal and going outside, he shut the door again. There were no noises. Jiraiya frowned, forced himself to stand up, and pushed the pain to the back of his mind. A nurse said, Hokage. Sama. What happened? Jiraiya staggered, grunting in agony, but the nurse mentioned earlier caught her. Thanks, Tsubaki. I don't know what happened, but I'm going to find out. With Tsubaki's help, the shattered Hokage slowly moved toward the bloody wooden frame through which the Hyuga had passed. He saw the Hyuga on his knees with his back to him as he stumbled out. They collapsed to their knees, gasping in shock, and the wounded ninja shuffled out of the hospital one by one. At last, Jiraiya stood alone, supported by the quivering nurse. Konoha lay in ruins before them. My house, Konoha, it's ruined. Everything is gone. There was nothing left. Now, many of the ninja were crying. Among the ruins, other ninja were standing and searching through the rubble, seemingly in search of their fallen comrades' bodies. The demons are nowhere to be found. If not for the fact that they destroyed Konoha, I would have forgotten they were ever here. Only ashes are left after the leaf was burned. In the end, it was all for nothing after a long time and numerous trials. All the hopes and dreams for a better life, all the sacrifices. Everyone is crushed. The remains of a once great village are in front of me, and I'm lost now. After spending his entire life defending those he holds dear, I now have nothing left to defend. Together, the kids would play and laugh as they ran through these streets. Mothers engaged in gossip with the maids, spreading inflated rumors while their eyes sparkled joyfully. My sensei wanted to change the shinobi's long, standing darkness. Hiruzen wanted to provide his people with a better life free from many of the sins that other villages were compelled to commit. He therefore shaped the village to suit his ideas. Even the ninja engaged in absurd antics and laughter while playing with the kids here. Here, even ninja could find love. Some got married and retired, leading tranquil lives away from the world's violence. Because of this, people perceived the leaf as weak and incapable of defending itself. How accurate they were. As though incredulous at what had happened, Jiraiya shook off the nurse's hand and staggered forward. One tear trickled from his eyes and followed the line of blood-red ink down his cheek. Even though dawn was approaching, it didn't feel like a fresh start. The Hokage fell, defeated. He didn't hit the ground, though. He was grabbed by powerful hands and lifted to his feet. A sluggish voice said, "Hokage Sama, why do you fall? You told me that a ninja always perseveres." Jiraiya turned, startled out of his melancholy, to see a man with silver hair looking at him with bright eyes. He had pulled down his head protector, which, as usual, partially obscured his left eye. In sharp contrast to his usual slouching stance, he stood upright and unyielding despite having deep gashes in his midsection and a Junin vest that was torn and ripped in several places. The man stated plainly, "The village may be destroyed, but its people are not." Kakashi, Hitaki. He's correct. The people in the village are what make it up, not the buildings. A new tree may emerge from the ashes, and it will bear many leaves. We must endure. But where do you persevere? At that moment, more ninja, their faces streaked with soot, joined him. Even though many of them had suffered severe injuries, they all stood firm together. Hokage Sama, where do we go? What do we do now? Sume Inuzuka asked in a defiant manner. Jiraiya sensed that the others were watching him. Choza Akamishi asked in a gentle voice, "Hokage Sama, what are our orders?" Choza, Kakashi, Inoichi, Sume. Even Danzo. There are numerous others, and they are all seeking my advice. I will lead them since I am their leader. All I fear is that I could guide them to hell. Including the wounded, there were now about 200 ninja in front of him. A gentle breeze increased, causing Jiraiya's white hair to fluff. Raising his voice, Jiraiya ordered, "As your Hokage, I order all of those fit for battle to accompany me to the safe houses. I do not understand why the demons are gone from here, but there still might be more attacking the civilians. The village might be destroyed, but we live on. Remember that." He was in pain and had been beaten and battered. He chose to ignore all of that, though, and the ninja took off again as the first rays of sunlight hit the ruins of Konoha. The safe houses in Konoha hungering for blood, Naruto charged at the adversary. However, his feelings were insufficient to revive his already worn-out body, and the giant man sent him plummeting face first into the ground with a simple flick of his wrist. The man ordered, not caring about him, "Secure the perimeter, make sure no one escapes." The ninja did not try to engage in combat. They just spread out, with some of them racing to the safe houses on the other side. "What the hell do you want with us?" Naruto said angrily, coughing out mud. Turning his gaze downward, the man said, "I am the Rampage, little boy. Do not tempt me. With a single command I could kill every single Konoha citizen. Even that pathetic little girl cowering in fear. She is a Hyuga, is she not? Ashamed to see such powerful eyes in the possession of a weakling who trembles at the mere sight of an enemy. But I am willing to be." Started the Rampage. "Shut up, you bastards, you killed my friend," snarled Naruto, who was already furious. Naruto leapt to his feet and ran toward the man with the dark skin, waving his kunai. The Rampage narrowed his eyes and slapped him lightly, sending him sprawling backward. Naruto's self-control had failed. To the surprise of everyone around him, the chains he had been trying so hard to make come so easily now, piercing his chest. Hinata's eyes were wide. What's going on with Naruto-kun? I must assist him. However, how could I, or anyone like me, defeat the Rampage? Persistent brat. I was going to spare you, but you leave me no choice. Kill him, the Rampage said. The shinobi in gray cloaks charged the writhing blonde as one. When Naruto realized he was being attacked, he pushed himself up again, his sapphire eyes blazing. Suddenly he felt a surge of strength that overcame the fatigue that had slowed him moments earlier. How difficult could it be? To the surprise of the Rampage, Naruto ducked beneath the kunai's swing, quickly extended his chains, and tore off the ninja's legs. All I had to do was think to kill someone. His next enemy silently materialized behind him, kunai ready to drive a sharp stab into his back. Without even bothering to look back, Naruto severed the man's wrist and then beheaded him with another of his lethal limbs. Is life limited to this? To accept? With all of his remaining strength, Naruto bared his teeth and was engulfed in a blue flame that illuminated him like a candle. This power was always mine. I've only ever killed with it. In the face of his fury, more men leapt at him, recklessly putting their lives in danger. They are terrified after witnessing my power. So why do they continue? What motivates them to fight on? Naruto whirled his body around and willed his chains to sharpen. Like a knife through hot butter, the sharpened metallic links sliced through flesh and bone as they snapped around in a deadly hurricane. It makes no difference. I'll murder them all. There were no more ninja. Naruto looked up to see the giant man gesturing for the others to back off. He continued, "You kill my men with such ease. It is clear you have power. If I did not know better, I would say that you were a descendant of the Uzumaki berserkers of yore." His voice was quiet but laced with rage and frustration. Then he felt his own power surge up, enveloping his body in electrical bolts that cackled. "But do you know why we fight? Do you know what drives me as the Rampage to send my men to their deaths?" With the intention of killing the Rampage, Naruto charged at him. The man cut through the boy's surrounding deadly web of silver with unmatched speed and practiced ease, landing a bone-shattering blow directly to the boy's jaw. Naruto's body flew away with terrifying speed after the punch. The sound of wood breaking was followed by a sickening crack. "Let me tell you why we fight. We fight so that we can feed our families and live better lives. We fight to crush our enemies and leave nothing behind." The blonde struggled slowly back toward the Rampage, his jaw hung open at an odd angle and uselessly. The boy crumpled to the ground as the Rampage lunged forward and kneed him in the abdomen. "We are not justified, nor do we claim to justify our actions. We are selfish, and we take what we want to better ourselves. And yet even in this world there are villages like Konoha, villages that live under the pretense of being the good Samaritan, giving help where help is needed." The Rampage pinned the struggling Naruto by putting his foot down on his chest. "This is a world of injustice, boy. The men you have killed were good men, men with wives and children waiting at home for them. This is war, and so people die. People like your friend, and you." The man raised his hand slowly and purposefully, lightning rushing across his skin. However, a tiny figure collided with him before he could bring it crashing down on the prone body in front of him. The Rampage was caught off guard and staggered aside. "Stop. I will be your opponent," a girlish voice said softly. The man looked up, his eyes wide with surprise. The girl who had flinched at the sight of his strength was the same one from earlier. What might have caused the abrupt shift? The Rampage exclaimed, "Another one. Die too then." With her arms raised in the Hyuga's traditional Jukan stance, the indigo-haired girl merely refused to back down. The Rampage might have chuckled at what he saw. Just a girl, facing a cage, horrible. The giant rushed forward and threw his leg out, slamming his shin into the girl's face. She attempted in vain to deflect the blow, shielding her head with her forearms, but the impact was so strong that her bones cracked. She fell backward and landed right next to Naruto's writhing body. The blonde turned red. He wanted to punish the man for harming Hinata by tearing his heart out of his chest. His body had had enough. Even though it was already well past its breaking point, he forced himself to fight the pain and, with tremendous effort, managed to stand up again. Each moment he stood was an effort that sent shockwaves of pain through his body. He spat, "I'll never let you hurt Hinata." His jaw was broken, so his words were a little slurred. The girl at his side also stumbled to her feet, her arms twisted and dangling pointlessly, but Naruto placed his hand on her shoulder and pushed her back to the floor. In her ear, he whispered, "I can't afford to let somebody else die because of me. I'll hold them off, so run while you can." "No. Naruto-kun. I want to help because The Rampage stepped in front of them before she could finish, putting a foot on Naruto's chest and knocking him to the ground. "I grow tired of this. I will kill you both now." He was hurled away at that moment when a huge pulsing orb of chakra struck his side. Rasengan. The remains of the Konoha ninja corps stood there, battered and bruised but still standing, directly in front of the battered blonde. The massive body of Jiraiya, Godem Hokage and leader of the Leaf Village, squatted in a combat-ready position where the Rampage had been. The Kumo leader stood up again in a flash of light and a cackle of lightning, frowning at the unexpected turn of events. The group of ninja drew their kunai together, prepared for a death-defying fight. The dark-skinned man lost control of his temper and began to fume. "Enough, do not be foolish, Hokage. I have heard of your prowess in battle, but look at you. You can barely stay on your feet." Jiraiya snarled back, indignant at the condition of his pupil. as you fight beside your men till your last breath, so I will protect Konoha until my own dying breath." The ninja in the crowd roared loudly. The Raikage said, "I said, enough," and everyone in front of him fell silent. "This is your student? I will have you know he attacked me first? Look around you. My men far outnumber your pathetic army. I had originally planned on striking a bargain, but your stubbornness and impatience makes me wonder how you came to be leader. Look, your men are tired and weathered, your citizens fearful. If you are the leader, then I pity those you lead," the Raikage said. Jiraiya was deeply hurt by the words. He was correct, he knew. Nobody desires to fight. No longer, they only fight because I tell them to. Sighing, Jiraiya replied, "What do you want? We have nothing now. Nothing to give. If we have to fight and die, then so be it. I have no interest in fighting, not anymore at least. Look around us, Hokage. There is not a single soul here, save yourself and your brash student, that wishes to battle. The night has taken a toll on all of us. My men are tired, and I would rather resolve this peacefully," the Raikage replied. "Shut up. Our Hokage answers not to the likes of you." Sume strode forward, arms raised, growling with barely contained rage. With composure, Jiraiya commanded, "Stop, Sume, stand down. Raikage, what do you have in mind? The demons have irreparably scarred this land. They are fox. Demons. It is no secret that Konoha has the Kyuubi Jinchūriki. The events are no doubt linked to it," the Raikage stated. "I want it. I want the Jinchūriki." There were gasps at this point. The ninja and residents of Konoha were all staring. "Why? Yes. Give it to him. It must be the reason why the foxes attacked us. They must want to free the Kyuubi," exclaimed a young civilian woman abruptly. Even some ninja found themselves agreeing, and there was a chorus of assents. Heishi Hyuga's voice was clear and calm as she said, "He is right. The Jinchūriki is no doubt the root cause of the problem. I say we wash our hands off him. This boy here, Naruto Uzumaki, he is the Kyuubi Jinchūriki." Hinata was at her breaking point. Naruto had just been putting his life in danger to defend the people of Konoha. How could they have so betrayed him? The knowledge that Naruto was the host of the Kyuubi and that he was somehow responsible for the demon attack was what she gained from the encounter. "Father, Naruto-kun is innocent. I saw him." Heishi slapped Hinata right away, causing her lip to split and blood to pour out. "I am not your father. Now be quiet." Jiraiya tried to improve the deteriorating situation by saying, "The Kyuubi is dead, Raikage." The Raikage's scowl widened. "You expect me to believe you? You just want to keep its power for yourselves. I have no more patience. Give me your answer now. If it is unsatisfactory, then we shall execute each and every one of you. It is our right, as victors." "Oh no, he's correct. We are greatly outnumbered by them. We are certain to die if we fight." Jiraiya sighed and made the hardest choice of his life. "We accept." When Naruto finally passed out, it was the final sound he heard. But Hinata was not going to give up. "No, how could you betray him? He would willingly give his life for this village." Hinata wept. "I can't allow them to harm him like this." Once more, Jiraiya spoke in a gentle, remorseful tone. "You have no say in this, girl. But you are right, he would willingly give his life for this village. That is why I do what I must. One person's needs are outweighed by those of many. Please pardon me, Naruto. Konoha is still alive, and we have to rebuild it as best we can." There was no trace of joy at his triumph in the Raikage's gloomy eyes. "A wise decision, Hokage. Perhaps we might meet again under better circumstances. Let us head for home." With his ninja following, the Raikage vanished in a crackle of lightning, slinging the unconscious boy over his shoulders. The Hokage then fell to the ground, exhausted, his eyes rolling back. While the clan heads gathered at the top of the mountain to debate and discuss the uncertain future of the Leaf Village, many Konoha ninja wandered aimlessly around the safe houses, unsure of what to do. Iruka, who had seen the entire incident, carried Hinata to the temporary hospital. He tried to talk to her as the Chunin hefted her off the ground, explaining why the decision had to be made. He could tell she was deeply affected, but she refused to respond, choosing instead to mope about her own suffering. She was unable to contain her tears as she lay on the thin hospital mattress that night. Why do I feel so weak, so inept? Now, like two waterfalls of liquid diamond, tears ran down her cheeks. She was aware that she existed solely for him. She was always sure she loved him. To be with him, she would stop at nothing. If only she had more strength. But now that he was gone, betrayed by the people he had worked so hard to protect, it was too late. She was aware of the mistreatment and seclusion he had to contend with. Everyone could see why he was a thing to be feared rather than a person. He carried within him the beast that had decimated Konoha years earlier. The foxes appeared to have returned with a vengeance. It was therefore not surprising that Naruto was held responsible for the entire incident. Hinata didn't care, though. She still adored him for his unwavering resolve despite all the odds against him. Despite his fatigue and wounds, she had watched him charge at the enemy. He fought for her and the civilians, ultimately buying enough time for the Hokage to show up. Unfortunately, he felt compelled to sacrifice his best warrior. Hinata was furious because she only wanted her Naruto-kun back and could not care less if Konoha's ninja all perished. However, as usual, she was too weak to make a difference or take any action. She was a death weapon, a ninja. She didn't want this life, though. She had only desired to be a part of his life ever since he had saved her and recognized her in a way that no one else had. In all but name, she was his slave, miles away. All that remained of the fortress was a heap of debris. The shogun rode a nearby warhorse while wearing full battle gear. The remaining samurai gathered at his sides, their faces unwavering. The Land of Fire is no longer a significant force in Japanese politics. It would take years to get the land, even decades to fully recover from the destruction. This makes matters more difficult. I will unavoidably have to postpone my plans. I must make a calculated withdrawal back to the Winter Fortress, where I can reorganize my forces and begin anew in the Land of Snow. I will return, and then the ninja era will be over. He advanced at the front of the line of fighters, driving his spurs into the sides of his horse. Even further away, Orochimaru smiled almost ecstatically as he made his way through the subterranean tunnels. His sibilant laughter reverberated through the hallways as he occasionally laughed eerily to himself. That went more smoothly than anticipated. Getting more followers is the only thing left to do. Maybe I ought to establish a whole new village. Whoa. Perhaps even acquire a new lab. Those sewers are something I detest. After all, they do smell. A private bath, too, or perhaps a bath that is mixed. He laughed even harder as this thought went through his head. I suppose I really picked up on Jiraiya's perverted tendencies. And what should my village be called? Kimimaro might be able to think of something. I understand. The Otogakure. I'll claim everything as mine when I get back. Hell, while I'm at it, I'll give the ninja era a new meaning. A little later, Naruto woke up to discover that he was in a pitch black room. His limbs were cuffed with metal chains, which prevented him from moving at all. Chakra suppressants, There was only unending darkness and no light. Then he heard people talking. What do we do with it? We break his mind. We need to extract his power. Why can't we break his seal? The next sigh was barely audible to Naruto. Too dangerous. Look, just do as I tell you. If you have any questions, I'm sure Raikage Sama would be happy to answer them. Once more, silence. Then there was light. A tiny light, a candle's flickering light. Two men were visible, staring directly at Naruto. One had two scars that ran vertically down his left cheek and had no arms. Both had a similar dark tan, and the other was young with short silver hair. The scarred man said, "He's awake." As he approached, the younger man cocked his arm back and punched Naruto in the gut, causing him to spit blood. Yeah, he is. Let's work our magic. The scarred man lit a small brazier and built it up gradually. He then inserted 3 metal rods. Naruto was asked by the young man, "So, how do you feel?" The blonde snarled as she looked up. "We got a feisty one. What do you think, Jubei?" The other man turned and grinned, flashing 2 rows of yellow teeth that were crooked. 2 to 3 weeks, I reckon. Are the clamps ready, Kitano? Yeah, all oiled and ready. Okay then. I think these are hot enough. He grabbed 2 blazing metal rods from the brazier and strode directly in front of Naruto, brandishing them as he would a sword. He smirked and said, "Hey. Well, how are you feeling?" Instead of deigning to respond to his tormentor, Naruto spit and hocked, striking him in the face. "Stupid fucking piece of," he swore and backed away. Kitano, the younger man, just sighed. "You always fall for that, Jubei. Let's make that motherfucker pay." Naruto screamed in agony as he drove both rods into his stomach. He inhaled the scent of sizzling meat. "Fuck you, bitch. How dare you spit at me, Kitano? Give me the other rod." Kitano took the other red-dot hot metal rod and offered it to his senior after nodding his agreement. He grabbed it and shoved the hot end into Naruto's shoulder, making him fight even harder. "You should enjoy it. We're your only companions here after all." It marked the start of an amazing friendship. EY, what do we avenue, there? Just a few women. We gone, enjoy them tonight. The kind of lovely morning that sneaks up on you and you don't even realize it was there. The sun was high in the sky, shining brightly, and there were no clouds in the sky. The tips of the trees were illuminated in a brilliant green by bright rays that fell upon them. Beneath the heavy canopy, a group of men were laughing merrily and drinking. Many of them were inebriated, despite the fact that it was only 2 hours after dawn. As he walked to the cages, a short, plump man gripped the end of a chain and pulled impatiently. A line of women trailed behind him, each with a metal ring cuffed around their necks and their hands bound together. Many of them had small cuts and vicious bruises, and they were all naked. Many of them were resigned to their fate, being used as tools for pleasure before being killed like cattle, and their eyes were lifeless and dejected. They were quiet except for the occasional groan and a stumble. With a plentiful harvest to keep the men occupied, it was a truly lovely day. Or it was meant to be, anyway. The calm of the morning and the bandits' revelry were interrupted when a man showed up. His body was heavily muscled and his skin was bronze. His white hair was combed back neatly to keep it out of his eyes. His face had distinct tear troughs, and his cheekbones were prominent. His enormous strength was demonstrated by the thick corded veins that protruded from his bare forearms. He had the scars to show that he was a skilled fighter. He was threatening to kill anyone in front of him with a grim line in his mouth. Black eyes scowled, unflinching at the squalor he had been summoned to purge. Then he said, "Hello, kind sirs. I take it you have had a good morning?" In a deep, irate groan. Yes. Versus very good morning to you. We would appreciate it if you left us alone to enjoy our breakfast. Came a stuttering, terrified bandit who dared to approach him. The giant put his hand on the man's head and pulled him up to look into his eyes as he strolled forward. The bandit shivered, his legs hanging helplessly in the air as fiery eyes met terrified orbs. "Do you want me to crush your brains out and hang you by your guts? Or maybe I could use your intestines as rope. Good rope is hard to come by after all." The man growled. The bandit blubbered in terror, and then everyone in the camp was hit by a strong stench. With his eyes darting to the other frightened bandits, the man spat in disgust and said, "Fuck no, you did not just shit yourself. I guess I'm really going to have to rip out your intestines." Many were already on their knees begging him to spare them. They were well aware that none of them had made it through the Kumo ninja's gentle mercies. Grunting, the gigantic being said, "Listen up. You will let the captured civilian women go, and you will get out of my sight immediately. If I still see you in 3 seconds, I will visit horrors upon you. Horrors so terrifying you will wish you were sent straight to the afterlife." The man smashed the bandit's skull in his hand into the ground, knocking him unconscious but not killing him, as the cowardly men fled while yelling hysterically. "Cowards, damn them." The man sighed and walked slowly to the women who were crying, untying their chains and releasing them. "Why should I give them a chance at all? These bandits would undoubtedly be dead by now if they had sent any more ninja." With another sigh, the giant started to guide the women away from the camp and back toward Kumogakure village. Who was this man? The women still feared. Did they just switch out one erratic master for another? The man chose to lighten the atmosphere as much as possible because he could feel the fear leaving them. "Hey, I'm leading you back to the village. You'll definitely be safe there," he said in a tone that was a sharp contrast to the frightful manner in which he had frightened the bandits away. He smiled and gave them the thumbs up. Keeping their distance, the women only huddled closer to one another. A dark shadow appeared before him before he could try again. She was completely covered by a black cloak and had a distinctly feminine figure. A curved sword, completely covered in dripping red liquid, was tightly grasped in her hand. Through the shadows of her hood, she lifted her head just enough to reveal her dim blue eyes. "You let them go again, I thought you would have learned by now," she said, her cold voice becoming a little agitated. "I could not bring myself to kill them, Samui-san. We are Junin after all. Are we so pathetic as to kill those so much weaker than us?" He replied with no qualms. "That is why you are weak. It is clear you have not come to terms with that incident yet. Those men captured these pitiful creatures you see before you. They have undoubtedly defiled and murdered many more. You think letting them live is a mercy? You curse other with your weakness." She growled, clearly angry. "I have enough of your incompetence. I have disposed of them all myself." I was powerless to stop the cloaked woman from beckoning the remaining nude women to follow her down the well-traveled path. The woman's harsh words made him wince, but he could hardly question their veracity. Indeed, he was a well-known Junin who was renowned for his strength and his reluctance to commit murder. He was rejected and viewed as weak because of this. And he was even prohibited from joining a genin team out of concern that his distorted morals would corrupt the next generation. Which ninja would be rational enough to not kill? For some, it was their nature, and for others, their profession. However, it could never take a life without consequence. Naturally, he had killed before, but he detested the guilt that accompanied it and the thought of stealing the most valuable thing in the world from someone else. He was tender. That he did not dispute. Seeing the life drain from other people's eyes was the one thing he could not bear to do in the world. The office of the Rampage 4 years have passed. Too long, 4 years. The situation infuriated the third Rampage, who sat in his seat and gazed out the window. Kumo's economy had been booming in recent years, and the village's finances were at their highest point ever. Since their victory over Konoha and the subsequent discrediting of their abilities, Kumo had experienced an unprecedented period of prosperity. However, it was insufficient, it was never sufficient. His illness had gotten worse over time. He was now afraid to show his weakness in public and could hardly go anywhere. He suddenly suffered from a fit of coughing. Before regaining his breath, he hacked and squeezed into his hand for a full minute. He noticed blood flecks in his outstretched palm when he looked down. As of yet, the Jinchūriki remains intact. Why? I need his strength. I can use it to heal myself. With it, I could take out all the adversary ninjas on the planet. Why doesn't he just break? Damn it. He stood up dazedly, stretching his legs and looking out his office window, lost in his delirious thoughts. He surveyed the village. My village is this. Everything that exists today is a result of my sacrifice. It's nothing without me. The mind of the Jinchūriki is still intact. It would be quick, they assured me. However, nothing has changed. I can't pass away. I used to accept my fate, but Kumogakure will fall without me. I have to survive in order to witness Kumo's continued ascent. I require its strength. Breaking his mind and making him follow my unwavering will is the only way to accomplish that. I can't put the beast inside myself until I force him to release it on his own, which is the only safe way to get rid of the demon. Even after years of preparation by Kumo's greatest seal masters, the torture still appears to have failed. What have I been missing? 2 ninja entered his office at that moment, bowed respectfully, and said, "You called, Rampage, Sama?" Their leader could tell they were afraid by the tremor in their voices. Without bothering to look at the two, the Rampage snarled, "The Jinchūriki." His voice was deep and ominous, and he threatened to die if he didn't get a satisfactory response. We have tried our hardest, Rampage, Sama, but nothing works. He is truly unbreakable. The one armed ninja blurted out, stuttering helplessly. The Kumo leader got up calmly and approached the 2 men who were trembling. You are relieved from your jobs. It has been 4 years, 4 years too long, he said. Then he swung his hand at the men, aiming the lower part of his palm at their necks. One by one, their bodies thudded to the ground seconds after their heads hit the ground, their faces permanently marked with shock. He strode from the room toward the prison block without a second look. A dwarfed everyone in his path with his massive frame as he walked the streets. He didn't care to look where he was going. He just kept moving forward. The commotion of the village was mentally blocked out as he lost himself in his own private reflection. The people he crossed did not need to be visible to him. Among them were Sabama, the attractive young waitress who was rushing to work, Takako, the elderly fortune telling oracle, and numerous others. Numerous times, at any time of day, he had strolled along the same road and was mentally aware of everything that was going on. Nevertheless, that subtle sensation that lurked at the corners of his heart persisted. Something didn't feel right. Ironically, it came to accept this sense of wrongness as the standard, but he was unable to completely deny that it existed and had for 4 years. Every single person in the village had an underlying sense of unease that pervaded every laugh and smile. Everyone was affected, from the youngest ninja students to the oldest and wisest of elders. Even more unsettling was the fact that he was aware of the cause of the discomfort. The academy kids stopped playing freely, and the young people no longer appeared to be in their prime and deeply in love. According to their beloved leader, sentimentality is destructive. The success of your village is the only true source of happiness, and, more recently, my word is law. With ruthless efficiency, the Rampage crushed any opposition under his iron fist. The kids were brainwashed into believing that the village was their only mother and the Rampage was their only father. They have to work to improve it or perish. There was never any question that the village owned their lives. The sole purpose of women was to produce men and enduringly loyal soldiers. Kunoichi were rare, and Samui was the only woman he knew who had never given birth. He shuddered as the thought occurred to him. Samui had always made him shiver, and not just because she was known for being a member of the torture squad. Only the best could match her ruthless and brutal methods, and she was even competitive with them. Everything under the Rampage's rule was focused on achieving military and economic success. Play and laughter were forbidden since they were ineffective. However, it was able to recognize the reality for what it was. The Rampage had permanently ingrained himself in the hearts and minds of the following generation by encouraging the emergence of a personality cult, which stunted the social growth of the populace and distorted the values of the children. Furthermore, there was no question about his deity or, for that matter, his weakness. Large looming statues of his skill and perfection were placed throughout the village, hidden in the clouds to feed his eternal ego. When they arrived at the village's southern boundary, a leapt to the summit of a rocky outcropping. This was his private haven, where he went whenever he had some free time and needed to think about something. After all, we are not all that different from the people we say we hate. Although the ninja way is associated with dishonor and darkness, it used to have deeper significance. Being a ninja used to mean being free from the rules and principles of the government's faceless autocracy. We used to make fun of the samurai for worshipping the emperor, the shogun, as a god, but now I realize that we are just like them. Our own leader even claims to be a god, and no one dared to challenge him. Everything had been different since the Night of Blood, when the Land of Fire was bombarded by night demons while we shinobi surrounded Konoha. After all, absolute power does corrupt absolutely. The blocks of prisons, ha, ha. His ragged breathing reverberated throughout the dimly lit room. A string of saliva clung to his dry lips and connected to the floor. The stench in the room would be intolerable to a normal man, but to Naruto, who had hung here for an indeterminate amount of time, it was the air he breathed in and savored because it reminded him that he was still alive. He was bound to the wall by metal chains. 2 bands secured his wrists to the black cement wall, and 2 more secured his ankles. He was bound along his midsection by a last piece of metal, which may have prevented him from ever escaping. Sordidly, he thought, he doubted he would have the strength to stand even if he did. The metal seemed to have become a part of him, and it had long since stopped chafing his skin. How much time until the next meeting? I don't think they could perform worse than they did previously. He was hungry. He did. Though the bread he ate was usually rotting and maggot-infested, he vaguely wondered when his next meal would be. He knew that his captors would never truly allow him to die, even though they would typically starve him until it was intolerable. Even the torture they inflicted on him was followed by a brief period of recovery. The majority of the time, they would almost kill him with their caresses, but they would always bring him back to life. When will Kitano and Jubei arrive? I wonder. Usually, they don't let me sleep for more than a day. He sighed as he realized how much he missed his tormentors. After all, they were close friends who gave him the hatred and rage he needed to live. He pictured himself doing the same to them each time they stabbed him with sharpened knives and sticks, relishing their cries and getting drunk on their blood. He felt the arrival of a familiar presence at that moment. Its aura was calm, reserved, and not at all ostentatious. It was not the warm, comforting aura of his torturer companions. Naruto screamed, "You're not Kitano. Ha! Ha! You're not Jubei. Ha! Ha 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 ha." A toneless voice said, "They are dead." "I'm shocked. I figured. You would have gotten rid of them after the first month. So why have you visited me, old man?" Naruto was furious. After Naruto's emission, there was a brief pause. The voice continued to speak, "I am amazed. Your mental constitution is truly one of a kind. Still, you are an Uzumaki. You possess the same unbreakable spirit and unrelenting will. It's not as if I have any other choice. This is my home. I live here, I eat here, I even shit and piss here. You are trying to move an immovable object here, old man. Not even the damned mind. Walker you brought here last time could break me," Naruto growled, altering his expression at the touch of an eyelid. "Ah. Kenzo was the best interrogator we had. A pity he went mad trying to force the secrets from your mind." With his nose wrinkled in disgust at the dirt that had gathered on the floor, the man moved closer to Naruto. "You are mistaken, Uzumaki. You are not immovable. And if I cannot get the power of the Kyuubi from you this way, I shall tear it away by other means. Your new partner will arrive shortly. I do hope she treats you well." Naruto spoke again, barely raising his voice above a whisper, as the hulking man quickly made his way out. "You're dying, aren't you?" The giant came to a complete halt. "I can smell the cloying stench of blood, your blood. Ha! You, who tout yourself as a god, now face the prospect of death. How ironic. I can see your desperation, the futile struggling of a drowning man clutching at straws." Naruto went on. "It is hopeless, my friend. Your death is inevitable. I said this before, so will I say this again. I do not house the Kyuubi, not anymore. Naruto had to face the Rampage after he slammed a fist into his chest, shattering bone. Twin pools of black met blue cerulean eyes. The dark man's face was etched with an expression of unadulterated rage. All he could growl was, "Lies," before vanishing in an instant. It was dark. The village of Kumogakure was illuminated by the gentle rays of the full moon, which was high in the sky. From his perch, it silently protected the little building he sat atop while keeping a watchful eye on the sky. The prison block guard duty is really dull. Maybe I should start going around? The heavily muscled man jumped from the roof to the floor, suppressing a yawn. The building, which was 2 meters high and 10 meters wide, appeared to the uninitiated to be no larger than the outside of a tiny hovel. However, it was aware that the door led to a staircase that descended into Kumo's darkest and most profound abyss of filth. If they weren't put to death right away, the murderers, rapists, prisoners, traitors, whether they were bandits or ninjas, were sent here to be imprisoned. A stood in front of the prison's sole entrance, bracing himself for the descent into insanity. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door and entered the room, locking it behind him. No prisoner, not even if it meant his own life, would be allowed to escape. He grabbed a torch from the wall, mounted torch sconce and went down the curved staircase, far below ground level. He wouldn't be able to identify the groans for another minute. The magnificent symphony poured through the dank hallways like foul water, leaving one in awe. Long shadows were cast on the stone walls by the flickering light, which appeared to be magical fire. He always detested the groans, so he shivered. The distorted noises filled the whole dungeon, soaking into his body and tainting his spirit. He made it to the first level. The more common inmates were housed here. Many of them were dissident peasants and impoverished citizens. Some of them were simply caught breaking some obscure law that the Rampage had passed, and his personal militia, a personal army of ninja who were only loyal to him, then captured them. Hundreds of meters from wall to wall, the first floor contained the greatest number of criminals in the prison blocks. Hundreds of inmates moaned and gazed at him with beseeching eyes, softly begging as they reached out. Some food. No more pain. Please, someone save me, I want to go back home. With a steeled heart, he returned to the main staircase while holding a torch high, seemingly to drive out the shadows in front of him. But long after he was gone, the darkness would continue to grow. So he went down again, to the second floor. The ninja prisoners were housed here. Everything from the bars of the many prison cells to the shackles of the inmates was infused with chakra. Suppressing metal. Since the torture and interrogation squad spent the most time here, relentlessly beating confessions and red fluid out of the criminals, the smell of blood was strong. Then there was a shriek, and it recoiled. The torture unit appears to be still in operation. Following a brief inspection of the locks and some small talk with the torture experts, it went down again. I had permission to enter the third level, which was the deepest. Before he could enter the dim, torch-lit room, he had to open 2 metal doors on his descent. The most dangerous of Kumo's adversaries were kept here. Every ninja in this place was kept in a semi-conscious state all the time, only to be tortured or put to death when the mind. Walkers in the torture squad woke them up. The majority of the ninja who were buried here either died from the agony or were put to death. They seldom, if ever, stayed for more than a week. I checked on all 15 of the criminals in the entire level as usual. My shift must be coming to an end soon. It's probably been 5 hours since I arrived here. I walked slowly back to the stairs, thanking himself in his mind that he was at last free to leave this damned place. He was about to walk away when he heard someone wailing. As if swiftly stifled, it vanished as soon as it appeared. I became curious and made the decision to find out more. He moved slowly past the sedated ninja inmates until he came to a door on the other side. I placed his ear against the metal portal's surface and heard a constant sobbing noise emanating from the opposite side. I am unable to enter there. There is no clearance for me. However, the crying persisted. At last, it could stand it no more. In order to satiate his curiosity, it cracked the door's seal and went back into the shadows. The cries became more intense until it arrived at a tiny room. He could only see 2 cells in the darkness, the deepest he had ever been. As he lifted his torch, he noticed that the sobbing sounds came from one of the cells. He gasped when the light entered the cell and revealed a woman who was chained and nearly nude and crying. Then she saw him, and she instantly stifled her tears as she cringed. I was immediately struck by the overwhelming stench that seemed to fill the entire room. As he peered into the cell, he discovered the source of the strong odor. The floor was covered in brown stains and coagulated filth, which made the man wrinkle his nose in disgust. She was blonde, and her eyes were the saddest black I had ever seen. They were the eyes of someone who had witnessed too much horror in her life. She was shackled by enormous chakra, suppressing chains, and did her best to cower as she gazed fearfully at the giant. Merely cast a sorrowful glance back, he was aware that this was the Nibi's Jinchūriki. She is a beast. Nothing more. The Rampage always says that. Screw the Rampage. In any case, I never trusted him because he was aware that the man was a power hungry demon who would destroy any remnant of freedom in order to feed his enormous ego. Even as he gazed at the Jinchūriki's too thin body, he was unable to fully overcome the superstitious fear that surfaced within him. At last, he was at his breaking point. I hurried out of the cursed place without turning around, thankful to get away from the oppressive stench. After an indeterminate period of time, the prison blocks. Naruto knew a visitor was coming when he heard the rusty iron portal creak. He looked up, his gaze fixed on the woman who had walked in. His eyes were so sensitive from the years spent in the dark that he had abnormally good night vision. After taking a whiff of the air, Naruto licked his lips. He always benefited from a change of company, especially when the visitor was especially ruthless. It was only meant to show how much suffering he was capable of. Who knows, his lack of cooperation might even drive her crazy. The woman stopped as the thought came to him, and he giggled a little. Then he stopped talking, and the two stared at each other, neither of them wanting to say anything. After a minute, it was 2, then 5. When Naruto finally had enough, he tried to get a response by hissing at the woman and tugging at his shackles. The woman moved closer and whispered, "Calm down. My name is Samui, and I'm not here to hurt you. I've heard much of you from my colleagues. Playing mind games, huh? Won't work on me. Just shut up and stick some hot pins in me," Naruto grumbled. "Oh, that will come later. It wouldn't be going back to the prison for another week." He found himself drawn to the same chamber once more. The woman was crying once more, and they started to question if she did that every night. Her tears ran down her soiled face, spilling onto the floor from her chin. He was able to speak this time. "Why do you cry?" The woman flinched as before, as though she was anticipating some kind of pain. Before departing, it would gaze at the woman's trembling form for an additional hour. For the next few weeks, he offered to serve as a prison block guard. It was the most hated job in the whole village, but he couldn't stop thinking about the woman. He was drawn to her for some reason, and he was starting to question whether he had been enchanted. He was there again 2 nights later. "Why do you not talk?" She walked over to the bars this time, her eyes wide as she gazed at him. "You won't even talk to me." She let out a low whining sound and pointed to her throat while simultaneously shaking her head. I leaned down until their faces were just inches apart and said softly, "You can't talk, huh? But you can understand me?" The dull metal bars were all that stood between them. "Are you the Jinchūriki?" She gave a small nod, squeezing her eyes shut as the tears returned to her eyes. That evening, I stayed behind and spoke with a woman who was incarcerated, sharing with her what was going on outside the prison. He was saddened to realize that woman would never be able to experience the cool night air the way he did when he finally left the prison and breathed in the crisp, fresh air that stood in such stark contrast to the stale, pungent air of the dungeons. After all, they were Jinchūriki, beasts, not people. And a righteous rage was sparked deep inside his heart. "The office of the Rampage, I sense that they are watching me. My adversaries encircle me like a herd of wolves. I am a dragon, and they are all scavengers. As my figure soars through the sky, I hear the bells of victory tolling in my name." Anger brimming, the third Rampage stood with his head bowed, surveying the village. "Their goal is to ruin me and my legacy. My village is to be destroyed." His lieutenants had reported that a number of the security seals around the village had failed. It seemed as though dissidents were encircling the Kumogakure from all sides, and even the integrity of the seals that prevented outsiders from entering the lower levels of the underground prison was called into question. This was interpreted by some as proof that the rebel army rumors were accurate and that they were looking for a means to release the Jinchūriki who were imprisoned. "Damn it!" the Rampage cried. He clenched his fist and mentally rehearsed various scenarios in an attempt to determine the best course of action. At last, he let out a sigh and settled back in his antique oak chair. He was forced to fortify his defenses and wait for hard proof to come to light. A thought then came to him. With an imperceptible smile, the Rampage summoned his ninja corps to a meeting. Kumo is a short distance away, deep, discordant. The torrential waters descended from the sky as the dark clouds let the floods in. The earth was shaken by the mighty force of thunder's unrelenting rage. With their straw hats casting shadows over their eyes, the 2 peasant farmers trailed the hooded figure ahead of them. They never lost sight of their lead as they moved swiftly. Then the 2 men stopped along with the figure. After closely examining the village's perimeter, fiery orbs turned to face the two behind them and gestured for them to approach. They strolled past and knelt on the ground, obediently, their eyes searching for the security seal's distinctive glow. Then they pressed their hands together and muttered unintelligible words before standing up again. It is done. The seals are disabled. Of late, new batches of seals have been set up along the village perimeter, so we have no choice but to use this route for intelligence. One of the men said with a gruff tone. In a feminine voice, the hooded figure replied, "Understood. I thank you, brothers, for your assistance. It was no easy feat tracking you two down." The other man replied, "As long as the pay is good, Samui-san." Samui stated in a toneless manner, "You will receive your compensation after this is finished, not a moment earlier. In any case, I found the perfect way to end this. We should get back and report to the elders." They were about to leave when a loud ringing noise came from inside the village. One of the men turned and squinted his eyes, asking, "What might that be?" Miles away, he could just make out the shadow of a bell tower. Must be quite a bell, that we're able to hear it from here. Before disappearing into the rain, Samui said, "An emergency assembly. You two go on ahead. Tell the elders I have pressing business to attend to." As soon as the emergency bell was tolled, they realized something was amiss. Wondering what might be going on, he and the other corps members fell into the assembly courtyard. The Rampage sat high above the courtyard, as still and majestic as ever. A quick glance around revealed that there were some ninja he was unfamiliar with, but more ninjas seemed to appear out of thin air. That they are all new recruits is not possible, there's definitely something going on. The minutes went by in silence, with only the many gray, cloaked figures standing motionless in the crowded courtyard as a sign of human presence. The congregation of men and women seemed to be dead husks, and not a sound was even made. The Rampage stood at last, his cloak flapping in the breeze. He spoke quickly, not bothering to speak to the hushed gathering. "You warriors of the shadow are called here today to receive my command. Make no mistake, any dissidents will be punished swiftly and severely. What is required from you is simple. Purge every traitor from Kumo land. You will scour the outskirts of the village, from the border to the hinterlands, but do not harm the crops. Dispose of the rebellious peasants and seize the land for redistribution." It was evident to it that many of his fellows were taken aback. The slight changes in their posture revealed their thoughts even though they didn't say a word. All eyes were on him when a younger ninja in the Kumo Chunin sleeveless gray vest struck his left breast. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear as he asked, "How will we distinguish the traitors from those who are loyal to the village?" After seemingly considering it for a moment, the Rampage responded in the same casual manner, "You will not know. Kill them all." He melted into the wind with a tiny electrical explosion. The courtyard was deserted a few seconds later. The blocks of prisons. "Oh no, she's trying to trick me into lowering my defenses, but it won't work." He hadn't been tortured once since the blonde Samui took the place of his tormentors. In reality, the torture sessions involved the woman sitting next to him on that rusty iron stool and discussing the outside world with him. He would rant and swear at her, but she would simply dismiss him with the cryptic remark, "I do not deserve your anger, but there are others that do." Naruto had itchy skin. The urge to feel pain, to feel that same satisfying feel of hot metal against his skin, itched. Here, night and day blended together, and time had no meaning. Only torture and recuperation were available, and the eternal life had never experienced such a lack of suffering. However, today, his body was screaming for pain. He needed to give it the familiar feeling that he had been denied in order to feed his addiction. Torture was something he needed and desired. He let his saliva fall to the ground and gave a low growl, as he usually did, while replaying in his mind the last time he had spent time with Samui. A little while before the icy voice made fun of him, saying, "You're quite an obedient prisoner, aren't you?" Despite raising his head, Naruto remained silent. "Are you content to be here, abandoned by your own village, wallowing in filth?" she demanded. "You act as if I have a choice. These chains are unbreakable by any standards." She muttered, "I could free you, I suppose." Naruto's senses were overwhelmed by an uncontrollable rage at this point, and he resisted and fought against his shackles. "Stop playing with me, woman. I swear, if I ever get out of here, I'll flay the flesh from your bones." Samui backed off a little but didn't back down. "You misunderstand me. I am not your enemy. You know who your true enemy is. It is the bastard who sits on his throne lording over us, killing innocents, killing children, killing family, don't you under?" she said again, but this time in a harsh and serious tone. "Shut up, I know what kind of game you're playing. You're trying to deceive me, but it won't work. The Raikage trusted you personally for this job, and there's no way I'm ever going to surrender to your methods, wailing Naruto. Naruto's vision spun as Samui lunged forward and punched him squarely in the jaw. Quiet. Your own brethren lie caged like beasts and animals, while the entire populace of Kumo suffers from the reign of a madman. He kills indiscriminately, and even we who fight for freedom must do so carefully, lest our families suffer his wrath. She tried to calm herself by taking a breath. Naruto was unable to speak because he was positive that she was more complex than first appeared. My own brethren? Do you mean the other Jinchūriki? I've told you and those before you so many times that I don't have it. In a bitter whisper, Samui said, my own family died at his hands. I've been forced to sully my hands with the blood of friends, all to gain his trust. I'm sick of it. There is, even now, an elaborate network of rebels hiding and waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. A group I am proud to support. Just imagine, with your help and the help of your own abused kin, we could easily overpower him. You could return home in a fortnight. Naruto thought, now I see what this is. This could be my opportunity to be free. Furrowing his brows, Naruto appeared to be carefully considering what Samui had said. Since he was no longer a Jinchūriki, he had no concern for the other prisoners, but he could now see the first chance at freedom. If he wanted to get out of his damned cell, he had to play his cards correctly. So, you are an ally? Naruto said after a lengthy silence. Unnaturally glum, Samui replied, if you want me to be. I see, then I will help you, no matter the cost. If taking the Raikage's head off his shoulders is your goal, then I see no reason why I cannot assist you in this endeavor. Free me immediately, and I'll see what I can do, Naruto replied. Samui paused for a minuscule second, seemingly taken aback by Naruto's abrupt compliance. In preparation for finally releasing Naruto from his chains, she approached slowly, placing her hand on the hilt of her sheathed katana. Naruto nearly let out a squeal of joy as he realized that he would finally be free. The blonde woman then stopped in the middle of her stride and left the cell in a composed manner. Naruto blinked. Huh? He glanced around, but the woman was nowhere to be seen. Damn it. Whether her story is true or not, I'll kill her when I get out of here. Angry inside, Naruto could only entertain himself by imagining scenarios in which he killed the frigid woman. Naruto let out a sigh. He was aware that he might never again be able to see daylight. He grinned a little as he recalled his life before being locked up. On one of those infrequent occasions, he was visited by pleasant memories of the past, in which he was constantly conversing with the elderly village chief, the Hokage. Naruto pondered, I wonder how he's doing now. Oh, he's dead, I said. Wait a minute, Hinata comes next. Hinata is who? Though he was unable to recall a face to accompany the name, Naruto had the hazy impression that he was missing something significant. Actually, the only faces he could recall were those of his former torturers, the old Hokage, and a white-haired man he recognized only as Jiraiya. He was just thinking about the past when the iron door suddenly exploded, a little startling him. He sighed as he looked up and saw Samui approaching him calmly. Lazily, Naruto drew lead, more talking. Then he saw that the woman appeared more rigid than before. As usual, her face was expressionless, but there were faint traces of a frown. No more talking, but I still have to reaffirm one thing. Will you fight by our side, fight on the side of righteousness? Samui said in a serious voice. Naruto's mood and demeanor drastically changed as he nodded enthusiastically at the prospect of freedom once more. Yes. I'll fight with you. I'll cut off the Raikage's head just for you. I'll slaughter their entire army. Then before I free you, listen to what I have to say. It seems that for all our attempts at espionage, the Raikage has found out about our insurgent operations. We have no more time to build our forces, because even now the Raikage has ordered the mass extermination of all the peasants in the countryside. The others may not have noticed, but the Raikage also mixed his personal guard in with the main bulk of Ninja Corps members, so that they might execute any ninja not obeying his direct orders. Even now, he sits in his office, surrounded only by his most trusted soldiers. If we strike while his back is turned, we could eliminate him quickly and efficiently, without anyone knowing. Although she believed him to be a Jinchūriki, Naruto was somewhat flattered that Samui regarded his power so highly. Even though he was aware that after being confined for so long, he would hardly have the energy to stand, he chose not to express his thoughts. He pleaded, understood. Now free me. The blonde woman yelled and swung her katana so quickly that the enormous chains that suppressed chakra were sliced through. Naruto was never happier to touch the ground than when he fell limp onto the dirty floor. Before turning to face his rescuer, the woman who had released his body from bondage, he looked up at the broken shackles that had held him for so long. In an attempt to stand up, Naruto clawed frantically in the dirt, but he discovered that his muscles had atrophied and were essentially worthless due to the passage of time. It felt like his bones were crumbling, and every little movement he made sent shockwaves of pain through his tiny body. They could never be healed because they had been broken so many times. But now that he had freedom at last, Naruto would never be denied. He felt at last free to use his power after years of being restrained by the shackles that suppressed his chakra. Like leeches bursting from the rotted sinews of plague. Filled carcasses, the familiar blood-red chains exploded from his back, causing him to scramble to his knees and scream in agony and ecstasy. Naruto laughed pleasantly as his chains extended and lifted him into the air, spiraling out like a lotus's blossoming petals. In a single thought, he willed his chains to be his limbs, to carry his heavy body. Then he smiled as he turned to face the amazed Samui. "Ha! I'm free!" Finally, Naruto shouted without restraint. Naruto put his chains around the struggling woman, and Samui grunted, "Oh. Okay, we have to get to the Raikage's office IMM. Ah." Samui yelled, "Wait, what are you doing?" Naruto enjoyed the sense of power that had been denied to him for a long time. Although the years had worn him down, his mental faculties were still strong and unwavering. For years, his unwavering resolve and unbreakable will were tempered, even warped, by the hammers of torture. He had changed, but he was stronger now. He willed his chains to launch Samui into a wall and smash through it with a gesture. He then stabbed her in the stomach with one of his chakra appendages. He could already feel the unquenchable desire to murder his tormentors growing stronger. Naruto snarled, "Do not be alarmed. I will kill the Raikage by any means necessary." Then the walls echoed with frightful intensity as he roared with such guttural rage. "It will be a bloody night. I'll kill anything in my path." Naruto tore his way out of the prison, leaving the bleeding, sputtering woman behind.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.